Hello, everyone. Welcome. It is Monday night. Time for revolutionary change. I'm Jen Perlman. I don't hear you.
Now you can, I think.
Now I can hear you.
How's everything going?
It's going good. You could see behind my curtain a little. I'm a little bit hesitant for people to see what's behind the curtain.
I see some kitchen of some kind.
Yeah, well, it's the kitchen, but you never know what could happen in there.
I've got these neighbors that really like to rev their motorcycle like really loud. I don't know what type of a bike it is, but I don't know. I just noticed that in the background. It's like, guys, if you're starting the bike, like get on the bike and go. Just don't let it sit idle.
Yeah,
Guys,
these are urban problems that I don't have.
Yeah, I guess so. You're living out in the middle of nowhere. You don't have to worry about.
I hear a tractor I hear the tractor. I hear cows sometimes, but yeah.
But those are sounds that I think you probably like hearing. So.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So hopefully Dr. West will be here any minute. Obviously, we've got a lot to talk about tonight with both him and Caleb Maupin. And so, yeah, we hope you guys are doing well. If you haven't already, make sure you smash that like button. Let's get this out there to as many people as possible.
The algorithm hates us, guys. We're being slant. And it's weird because I feel like we keep increasing subscribers, but we keep going down in money.
Yeah, that's true.
So guys, check us out on Patreon. Consider supporting on Patreon because Google is not good to us.
Guys, we don't need a lot of money. If you have any potential benefactors out there that would be interested in sponsoring our channel, I mean, Jen has said one of the reasons why our channel gets suppressed the way that it does is because we do have ads on our channel, and we're not exactly considered an ad-friendly channel, but as long as we're here, they're going to play them. So, you know, I've seen in certain circumstances where we weren't able to do ads on a given video. I remember the Michael Jackson video on Palestine in particular. That one would not get monetization, and we ended up getting over 35,000 views on that clip. So that to me is a reflection of, we know, as I had pointed out during one of the segments I did on Saturday, we talked about the fact that Alphabet, the irony behind that name of a mega corporation, but Alphabet owns YouTube, owns Google, and a whole bunch of other multinational corporations. And as you can imagine, the powers that be within Alphabet are all Zionist Jews. So that should not come as any surprise that they don't think very highly of our channel. So that's one of the true downsides to trying to do it. Yeah.
Shocking that the Zio-owned media universe doesn't care for our takes.
Why would they care? This is the byproduct of the broken system. And so if Rach, if you're in the chat already, just want to check with Mrs. West to make sure that everything's good to go. We want to obviously make sure, because I thought he was going to come on at 7.
I'm not sure if she is. I'm not sure if she's watching.
She was here at 7:05.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Okay. Well, we'll go till 7:15 Eastern, just in case.
Okay.
So if anybody's wondering whether things are going to get bad for Zionists everywhere, Colin, can you send me just the message from Dan Goldman that I had sent you earlier?
This isn't Zio Hunter, is it?
No.
Okay.
Well, I mean, I guess technically it would be.
Well,
but,
I mean, but you have a Zio Hunter for later.
Yeah, no, you had it, Colin. You had it. Go back. Go back. No, there it is. Go back. New York City coffee shop bans pro-Israel politician in nasty post despite promise to treat all customers with unconditional dignity. I don't know. I mean, ask the Zionists how they feel about unconditional dignity for everyone who isn't chosen. I don't know.
Wait, let's have a media literacy moment, right? So, of course, this is the New York Post, right?
Yes.
Okay, so take this for whatever that's worth. But coffee shop bans pro-Israel politician, not pro-genocide. See how they do that? Because if I were writing it, I would say New York City coffee shop bans pro-genocide politician. despite their promise to treat all customers with unconditional dignity. And then I would add, P.S. Zio-Nazis do not deserve dignity. So I also would think that they're not even really fully fledged people. So I'm not entirely sure they would qualify as a customer. But yes, he is a pro-Israel tool. And apparently he was asked to leave and refunded his $9.82 for what
And
I'm
not only that, but
this gas man coffee drink.
well, not only that, but the owner of the shop said specifically, we don't want genocide enablers in our place. That is the exact language he used, and I don't blame him for using it. I think it's very appropriate. And Dan Goldman, of all the people that doesn't deserve any grace, the fact, and let's be very clear here, Dan Goldman is again, it's like Schlossberg, running for Congress. It's like, do you guys not have anything, you rich sons of bitches, you Nepo baby Zionist sons of bitches? Like, do you not have anything better to do with your life? What in the hell do you want to do? Why would you want to be in public service?
Do we know which coffee shop this is so we can promote it?
Yes, it's what is the name of the coffee shop?
I only see an awning that literally just says coffee, so I don't see what it is. Let's see what we're talking about here, guys. A crunchy coffee shop.
Poetica Coffee on Larmer Street in Brooklyn.
All right, guys, go to Poetica Coffee in Brooklyn, Larmer Street. If you're anywhere in the vicinity, show them love.
Hey, Congressman Dan Goldman, we see that you stopped by our shop today for a coffee. Do you see how it doesn't taste like genocide juice? Or like they're not around. Like, that's pretty serious stuff.
Good. I think that what this shows to me is that a lot of these shops, are realizing that they're getting just as much, if not more, support for taking this stand as they are getting blacklisted for it. I think we're finally at the point where that has shifted. And so the risk is almost equalized. That's what it seems like to me.
I think in the past, a lot of people were concerned, like they would have been about, guys like Einhorn and now Goldman and many others, where they would use the power of the Israel lobby to basically come after these people, basically tell them that we're going to ruin your life, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. And all the while, they realize that it's not worth it. Like, even if you are to attempt to ruin our lives, which obviously they've been known to do, it wouldn't make any difference in their mind if they knew that the way that they had to live with themselves is aiding and abetting a genocide, or just the whole concept of their culture. And so by that measure, their attitude is, all right, hit me with your best shot.
Well, yeah, and this is true what Kenman is saying. There are definitely brands, products, and people that are being hyped up and supported because of their anti-genocide stance. So that's my point. I think it might not be equal yet, but it's getting close where it's turning.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that this is just a lesson that a lot of people are going to need to learn, and they're going to learn it the hard way. Colin, if you could grab that other tweet from John Cooper. And for those who don't know this, John Cooper, not John Cougar Mellencamp. No.
Well, I was going to go into the whole diatribe about how he actually switched his name back to Mellencamp because of the whole, contract debacle, and yeah.
John Cougar, John Mellencamp, John Cougar Mellencamp. They all go through that.
Well, so, I think we're talking about Mellencamp than whoever this douche canoe is.
Well, here's the thing. John Cooper is he's what you would call a part of the consultant class. Bundler, the whole thing within the Democratic Party. And by saying, imagine Trump being invited to join a photo like this, who cares? Why do you think that this is a flex? It's not. It's not. And of course,
right there, you've got a batting 500 on sexual assault perpetrators in that picture.
That's something we actually know about. I mean, again, there are so many.
Right, as to far we know.
Well, in terms of most politicians, again, this is the thing, and this is the thing that, whether it's whether it's any of the people we've met over the years, whether it's any of the people that we have broken bread with that are on the same page, that are not on the same page, it goes without saying that the whole concept of decorum politics, to feel good about yourself because, oh, look, the Democrat and the Republican are getting along, they're being friends. Like, how that can compute with anybody at this point. And like I said, I don't want to just specifically single out John Cooper, but he happens to be somebody who lives in a very nice area of Long Island. And that, I think, in many ways exposes what the primary issue is here, that obviously, Dr. West and many others have spoken on in a very profound way, which of course is the class struggle, the class war. That is the fight. So if you think that there's anything to brag about regarding our commanders in chiefs over the last several decades, no, there isn't, because they've contributed to the downfall of where we are now, which is, and this is going to be very fun to talk about with Dr. West, are we in a revolutionary moment now? Are we there? And this is...
I'm there. I'm there. Oh, I've been there. I don't know where you are. I'm there.
Well, the amazing thing is that the first time we spoke with Dr. West was the day after, I believe, or the day after, it was the day after the 2024 election. And how much has really changed since then? Have we ended up exactly where we thought that we would be? But he is one of the truly great thought leaders of our time. He's somebody that Jen and I revere very, very much. And the Senator of Vermont should always be thankful for everything that he ever did for him, as far as I'm concerned. Dr. West, a pleasure. Welcome back to Revolutionary Change.
Oh, you all are so kind. I'm telling you, I just hope that your loved ones are in good shape. I like the smiles that I see on your faces. That means you got some joy in your heart and soul in such a grim and dim moment.
Always when you come on, we're always having a little hope in our soul. We're getting our soul in our soul when you come on.
Well, no, you all got a whole lot of hope that you have honed out over the years. Even though you're young, you've been at it in an intense way, in high quality manner. And it's always a blessing to be here with you, Del. Very much so.
Thank you.
Dr. West, you have obviously been at the forefront of a lot of sea change in this country for quite a number of years. What do you currently see is happening? Jen and I are both of the mind that we are headed for some type of a revolution. It is obvious that the accelerant has been Trump in conjunction with Israel's ungodly actions, and that's putting it nicely. How do you see the trajectory of where our country's going right now?
Well, it's hard to predict, though, brother. I mean, there's certainly been a massive counter revolution that's been at work with the fascists in the driver's seat. There's no doubt about that. The irony is that it's been an attack on neoliberal rule, as if that neoliberal rule has been leftist rule. So there's no accident in public discourse when people talk about the left, or when Trump talks about radical socialist and radical left, he's talking about the Democratic Party, and we know that's a joke. It couldn't be more than false. But I mean, Trump himself specializes in mendacity, tied to cruelty, tied to a whole host of other things that we'll be talking about, I'm sure. So in this moment of overwhelming counter-revolution, does that make it a revolutionary moment? I would say we'd have to really stretch what we mean by a revolutionary moment. It's certainly a moment where lies are being revealed, lies linked to neoliberal rule, lies linked to imperial policy around the world, be it in the Middle East or other places. But do we have a left that's strong enough, or the strong enough infrastructure, strong enough institutional presence in the country to engage in the kind of revolutionary change that the country really needs? Trotsky used to say that America is the one country that probably needs a revolution more than others, but it's not capable of a revolution because its working class is not organized enough. It's divided by race, divided by gender, divided by region, and at that time it was thoroughly divided by religion. So, and he was speaking from Mexico, right before he was murdered by Stalin's gangsters. But Trotsky does have a point. That is to say that when you have a weak, organized working class, because class struggle is still at the center of this thing, And if you don't have an organized working class with a vision that can actually bring and sustain a multiracial unity to bring a massive, not just a critique and condemnation, but power and pressure to bear against a greedy, oligarchic, and monopolistic ruling class that's been on steroids for the last 40 years in terms of its greed, then it's hard to think that we're at a revolutionary moment. But I'd like to hear you all's analysis and what you think in terms of whether you think it's a revolutionary moment.
The way I look at this is that we don't have a strong enough left. Politically, there is no left. But I mean, even just like an uprising left, I feel like it's very fractured and it is not organized enough. But what we're seeing now because of Trump, it's almost like we're gaining support of the populist right. And, when more and more people are realizing that this is a class issue, then it appears that the revolution is not necessarily coming from the left, but it might be properly coming from the bottom. And maybe that's what that's what we need to happen. I mean, one of the biggest problems with the left is they alienate other working people from their movement. And that, I think, is one of the biggest problems on the left.
I would agree. I think that what we have seen, and this is just my personal observation, is that if there is one true left leader in the United States right now that is in elected office, it is Mayor Mamdani in New York. I think the things that he has done, particularly financially speaking, how he has made it his mission to basically say the oligarchic class is not going to rule this city anymore. And if you guys are going to try to test me as to whether or not you're just going to leave, then do it. But the people of this city are not going to be subjugated by you any further. In addition to that, he has been canceling city contracts between New York City and Tel Aviv. And if you ask me, that's an even greater sign that he's willing to take the type of radical risks that Malcolm would be very proud to see somebody doing today. Because if you're not willing to be hated or not willing to be an enemy, then you're not going to make any change. It's when the powers that be get upset and have to put out messages about people, this person's dangerous, this and that, that's when you know you're having an impact. And to me, that's one of the reasons why I don't care who's doing it. If you're willing to say what needs to be said in this moment, even if it's somebody like Tucker Carlson, so be it. But something has to give. And that is the essence of any type of a revolution. You don't just need to have the working class united. You do need class traders as well. So figuring out how to build that coalition is going to be key. But in my opinion, the thing that I've been noticing that perhaps you've been noticing as well, the disenchantment, the disillusionment of the two-party system, it's now becoming real where people are like, I may vote for a candidate that is within the two-party system, but I sure as heck am not supporting these two parties anymore. That's done. So in that respect, I think we're heading in the right direction.
No, I think you both have strong points to make, and I do accept them. I mean, 2 points. One, you've already had a majority of fellow citizens who have completely withdrawn from participating in the political system. So that when you talk about disenchantment and frustration of the massive corruption of the duopoly, you already had that manifest in 52% of fellow citizens just not participating at all. And it won't budge. It won't budge. So anytime you're ever talking about elected officials or you're talking about citizens who participate, you're not even talking about majority of citizens in an empire that's unraveling. So that's one very important point, because even when the frustration intensifies and increases, a lot of that intensity is manifest in those folk who have been participating and begin to see how corrupt the two-party system is and either try to opt for third party or third pre-party formations, because a lot of times it's not third party, it's just a certain kind of frustration that takes the form of a certain kind of rebellion. But the second point I would make, though, is very important to always draw a distinction between revolution, which requires high level of organization over time and space, with rebellion. And rebellion here is very important. usually because rebellion has been associated historically, more so than other forms of resistance, with folk on the chocolate side of town. You see, from Watts 65 to Harlem 943 to Newark and Detroit 67. We can go on and on and on. LA 92. So those were not revolutions, those were rebellions from below, mainly from people outside of the two-party system who had given up a long time ago. And yet its response usually to police. Now, you see, on the chocolate side, where I spend a lot of my time, I'm sure you all do, but I spend a lot of my time there. What are the issues? Police. Well, when you look at Mamdani, what does his police commissioner look like? Well, it's the same sister in place that was in place before under the gangster Adams, the black gangster. You see, so that's a major issue. What's the other issue? Poverty. Well, he can't do a whole lot about poverty, but at least he makes certain references to it in a way in which the neoliberals have not. But police is very important. And if you got the same police commissioner in place, when he went to see Trump, what was the first thing Trump said to Mamdani? I love the fact that he's got my dear friend Tish still in place because we both agree that she's wonderful. Well, you see, you got a certain convergence of both ruling class mentality and social democratic. Because I mean, Mamdani, I support him. I'm a critical supporter, just like Brother Sanders and Sister AOC. I'm very critical of them in a lot of ways, but I support them because they're so much better than the others.
Correct.
But when you're really talking about revolution in a substantive way on the chocolate sides of town, you're really talking about poverty and police. And you and I, all of us know that, for serious socialists, I go back to March 82 when DSA was founded with Michael Harrington, Barbara Ehrenreich, and Stanley Aronowitz, and Bogdan Dinich, and a host of France, Fox Pivot, and what have you. Serious socialists always call for the breaking up of monopolies. They call for the breaking up of the oligopolies. It's not just controlling, it's not just regulating. You want to break them up. You want workers' control in a serious sense. Now, we know that might be utopian, but that's what the socialist vision is all about. So it's not just a matter of expanding social programs. That's progressive liberal stuff. Good. Kindergarten, fine. Buses running fast, wonderful, but that ain't socialist. That's good social programs that come out of some of the crumbs that's left when the ruling class exhausts so much of its resources in terms of the wealth produced by working people. And so in that sense, I would agree with you. I think New York City and maybe now Washington, D.C., and who knows, maybe L.A. and other cities become very important places to keep track of. But we also have to keep in mind that there's not going to be a multiracial unity among the working class if you don't come to terms with the police and the police murder and brutality, or issues of poverty that sit at the very center of so much of the lives of 30% of Black and brown children, and almost 20-some% of children, working children, poor children as a whole. So those are some of the issues that I think we want to continually wrestle with. And I think the Mamdani and the others are going to have to hit these issues even more intensely and strongly in the near future.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I have been working on Peter for quite some time on this issue. I started a series a while back called Mission Abolition. And I am very firm in the belief that there cannot be a revolution without abolition. I believe that those two things have to kind of happen. Like that is part of it. And there's no way to reform that. That to me is the equivalent of what you're saying in terms of social programs. And okay, those are all nice. That's really great. Like, yeah, you could go give the cops body cams. That's not solving the problem. No. So it's like, to me, and obviously you could confirm this, abolition is the key in how we handle all of this, because that's the boot of the oppressor. That's the whole point.
Yes, but you also have to remember that you have to also meet a lot of people where they are. As much as it pains people to have to come to this realization, especially for you, Dr. West, being in Southern California, the people that live in the hills, what has always been their top priority? Comfort. And not only is comfort their top priority, but they vote. And they vote with their feet and they vote with their wallets. And so understanding the downside, the true downside of capitalism is the concentration of power and wealth, not just amongst the elites, but amongst the voting population, the people that get out there. Like you said, over half the population is completely disillusioned with the electoral process. And I'm willing to bet that the concentration of that voting demographic falls on the side of the working class almost universally. And so as a result, trying to find any type of a positive is not easy right now. You brought up an excellent point about Mamdani. I do believe his greatest failure is keeping Tish on as the police commissioner, which of course is a direct tie to the state of Israel. However, I do want to play this very quick clip from over the weekend when he's obviously been out there campaigning for Brad Lander to get Dan Goldman, who's one of the biggest, obviously richest and pro-Israel congressman in the United States. This is what he had to say, and I think it's actually pretty impactful what he was saying.
And we need that because, as Gramsci once wrote, the old world is dying and the new world struggles to be born. Now is the time of monsters. These monsters take many forms today. In those who fund television ads that blanket the airwaves with misleading and bad faith attacks about Claire, Brad, and Dari. Those who would rather spend far more on political contributions than they would ever be made to pay in taxes. In AIPAC, for whom the only thing more frightening than democracy being allowed to run its course is an end to genocide and Netanyahu's wars. They move millions in dark money to accomplish a single goal: to preserve their power so that they can turn us against one another, instead of our leaders turning towards the moral change we all know to be necessary. In a politics that for too long has asked working people to lower their expectations, to settle for less, to become satisfied with small victories while our wages grow even smaller and our costs grow even larger. To resign ourselves to resignation, to accept the unacceptable. In the wealthiest city, in the wealthiest country in the history of the world, we need not live in fear of monsters any longer.
Now, apparently, the Israel lobby completely lost their mind over this. I don't even think he was really being that aggressive, but...
Did he even mention them?
Yeah, he did.
Okay.
Well, he mentioned AIPAC. And he's willing... it's funny. You often say this, Jen. Our bar is in hell. So anything above that bar is
That's a wonderful way of putting it, Sister Jen. No, but my dear brother, though, see, Mamdani, I mean, he's a fascinating figure for me because he certainly is a younger generation enactment and embodiment of the democratic socialist tradition that I've been a part of for over 50 years. And that's why I've been such a critical supporter of him. But at the same time, you see, when you talk about somebody like Tish, you're not primarily talking about imperial policies of genocide and ethnic cleansing in Gaza. You're talking about stop and frisk in Harlem, or stop and frisk in Brooklyn. Or you're talking about providing information for ICE so that when the neo-fascist elites come into your town, you've got to coordinate with them. You got to cooperate with them. That's part of the nature of the cooperation of the repressive apparatus at the local level with the repressive apparatus at the domestic level. So that when he decided to hold on to Tish, and of course Tish herself is what? Part of a family that has billions of dollars of real estate. Exactly, real estate thing. So that when he was talking about, monsters, now you talking about Sister Jennifer herself and the Tish family. Well, let's be clear about this, brother Mayor. You said this is part of your cabinet. Now he would come back and say, well, Brother West, as a pragmatist and as a practicalist, this is the way I rule, and I have to be able to have some connection. I'm still part of a Democratic Party, a party itself that is thoroughly subordinate to the same policies in Gaza that he himself is very critical of, but he's still part of that party. He's just part of the progressive wing of it, like Bernie and AOC and others. And I say, well, I mean, I think Democratic Party is beyond redemption. Well, that puts me way outside, but I think I'm telling the truth. It's not just a question of who's outside and inside. If the truth is that the Democratic Party will never be the institutional vehicle for the empowerment of poor and working people, no matter what color they are, or colonized people, then we have to be critical of that. That doesn't mean certain individuals in that party are not, good people and progressives and so forth, but the party itself as an institution. Well, Mamdani hasn't reached that point. Oh, no way. No way. I don't think he will. But who knows? I mean, you never know what the future will be. But look at it this way. You see, when I hear my dear brother Mamdani say in an inaugural address that this is a city of immigrants, that just erases indigenous peoples and black people. See, I have no patience for that. I really don't. I had that at Harvard College in the 1970s with dear brother Oscar Hanlon in his book, The Uprooted of 1951, when he would stand up and say, America is a nation of immigrants. We say, no, Professor Hanlon, no, tell the full truth. You wouldn't even have the immigrants coming to the empire if you didn't have the land stolen and if you didn't have the stolen labor of African folk that created the very context and nation or institutional or constitutional republic as an experiment based on those barbarities. Let's just tell the truth. I'm still very committed to America has democratic possibilities because I believe you had to have a dialectical read of this thing. I do, in fact, think that the struggle against British imperialism had some positive elements to it. Some of my left comrades would say, no, Brother West, it didn't have any positive at all. And they're still my comrades. I just disagree. I think that anti-imperialist struggle against the British Empire did create some democratic possibilities that even black folk could get in on, even indigenous peoples could get in on. But that's a larger discussion. But when I'm talking about Mamdani, when I hear him using the language of immigrant at the center, rather than, now in this speech that I just heard there that you all just provided, I didn't hear too much talk about immigrants. I heard class. That's a little closer to my heart. Not because I'm anti-immigrant. Oh, no, my God, America without voluntary immigrants is inconceivable with the levels of contribution, artistic, political, existential, religious, and so forth and so on. But they're part and parcel of a larger whole that also goes hand in hand with indigenous peoples and certainly goes hand in hand with black people. So you just want to talk about the whole, that's all. That's what I'm requiring, because if in fact you end up with a talk about, well, we're a nation of immigrants, then you're going to overlook the 250,000 black folk who under gentrification were pushed out of New York City. And if part of DSA, if part of their social base are some of those gentrifiers, then you got a gentrifier sensibility in your democratic socialist project, which ends up having a settler mentality in this democratic socialist project. And as a democratic socialist, I don't want any settler mentality. I don't want gentrifier sensibility. I want moral and spiritual commitment to poor and working people, no matter what color. But it means when you talk about working people, you're not primarily just talking about immigrants. You're also talking about the ex-enslaved and the ex-Jim Crow, who are now still very much dominated and subordinated by the ruling classes that he rightly criticized in that speech, and the imperial elites that he rightly criticized when he talked about our precious Palestinian brothers and sisters in Gaza.
It seems to me that, and this definitely happens on both sides, whenever there's some sort of sectioning off of people or virtue signaling, whether it's about immigrants or even if it was specifically just about American descendants of slaves or whatever the specific group, it could be LGBTQ, that is completely, to me, a partisan tool that they're using to crush the uprising, because that's one of those things that they play on all over the place. So at this point, anybody who's affiliated in the duopoly is literally just interfering in the revolution. That's all you're doing, is interfering in the revolution.
Dr. West, what was your, if you could look back on it now, obviously it's been a little bit of time where you can have some reflection. What was the experience like from a positive and perhaps even from a negative, running for office, going around the country, experiencing what it's like to be scrutinized in a way that becomes a lot more personal in many respects when you're a candidate. And maybe some of the lessons that we can still learn today, particularly, Bernie's run, I still say in 2015, 2016, was the best thing we have seen in our respective lifetimes. And it is still a crime, as far as I'm concerned, what the Democratic Party did to him. And we all know that they did. But what was that experience like for you personally? What were some of the positives and even negatives that you went through going through campaigning?
Well, I mean, one, my dear brother, I just had a wonderful time, man. I met some of the most magnificent human beings in so many different states in the country, on the ground, in their own context. You talk about meeting people where they are. Now, I've been traveling the country for 50 years with lectures and what have you, but it's a very different thing when you're actually in a campaign. And there with Melina Abdullah as my vice presidential candidate, God bless her, we just had magnificent energy coming our way. At the same time, though, it was clear that the level of just sheer corruption and spiritual decrepitude of the Democratic Party and then the Republican Party, we had no expectations of. We know it's got fascists in the driver's seat, so you don't expect too much. But Democratic Party would spend almost $20 million to keep us off the ballot. So we had so many people who would come up to us and say, my God, we want to support and vote, but we have to write you in. And we did have 26 state write-in, the largest write-in campaign in the history of the country, with Kiana, who was campaign manager, doing such a magnificent job out of Ohio. But we were able to only get on 16 states because we battled North Carolina. We just won that case. Thank God to Brother Oliver. He's the same lawyer who was with our dear brother Ralph Nader way back 20-some years ago. And right now we're at the Pennsylvania Supreme Court trying to open up third-party possibilities there, because we were also sued there. When you get sued, they come out with big money. We didn't have hardly any money at all. So our backs are really pushed against the wall. So it was a twofold experience, though. On the one hand, magnificent interaction with people who are hungry and thirsty for more than just neoliberal versus neo-fascist. And at the same time, the sheer corruption and the power of not just, though, the Democratic Party, but their journalistic comrades. It was very difficult to get a sustained hearing. Every once in a while, we might get a mainstream media open, but it's very difficult to get a sustained hearing. So you could just see, the level of corruption, of complicity, of outright capitulation to the framework of the powers that be. But of course, all of our voices are just some voices alongside other voices, figures among other figures. And the good news is that we still out here fighting. We still swinging.
Well, if there is anybody who's running for office right now that I believe we all should be supporting, it's Kshama Sawant, who is running for Congress in Washington's 9th District as an independent. And I think she has not only a really good chance of winning, but the congressman that she is running against, Adam Smith, has been there for a generation. He is as corporate and as pro-Israel as it can get. There's not a lot of races out there, but do you still maintain a dialogue with Kshama?
Oh, indeed. We've got pictures together, and my support of her and so forth. She and I go way back. She comes out of Socialist Alternative and so forth. So we haven't always, seen eye to eye, but I have great respect for my dear sister, and her voice is very, very important one. And as I said, it's just maybe a couple of months ago that we were on social media together, showing that kind of solidarity. But I do hear what you're saying, and we do have to deal with certain folk within the Democratic Party. There's no doubt about that. It's just that the critique of the corrupt duopoly always has to go hand in hand with our connection with any individuals. I've been very, very reluctant to endorse any Democrats. But I've always let them know that I prefer them over certain other Democrats, neoliberal, moderate, corporate Democrats tied to imperial policies in Gaza and what have you. But in the end, let me just say this, that whether left, center, or right, there are still spiritual and moral issues of character, of integrity, of truth telling, of honesty. These are very important, you see. And, I've been involved in a lot of this controversy recently around Iran because I have no reluctance to bring critique to bear on the repressive regime in Iran. And that doesn't, people say, oh, you must be in love with Mossad. No, quit lying. Oh, you must be tied to the State Department talking heads. Quit lying. I'm concerned about working and poor people, dealing with repression and dealing with domination wherever they are. I'm against the immoral war and the illegal war that the U.S. imperial entity engaged in with the invasion and so forth, you see. I'm against, of course, the genocide in Gaza and so forth. I acknowledge the degree to which the repressive regime in Iran was willing to provide support for the Palestinian resistance. I understand that. The Soviet Union did the same thing for Mandela, and we had talks with Mandela. And I still had critiques of domination and repression within the Soviet Union. It could be Jews in the Soviet Union. It could be workers in the Soviet Union. It could be dissenting voices in the Soviet Union. I'm in solidarity with those folk critiquing Soviet domination, and I support the Soviet Union providing resources to support the struggle against apartheid. And so we just had to be morally consistent in some sense. And it's very, very difficult to do that because you're going to get trashed and vilified in a number of different ways. But I mean, I'm used to that. But I do think that issues of character is very important. It really is. There are such things as right-wing gangsters who rule and left-wing gangsters who oppose that rule, but still treat their own folk in very repressive ways. We had to be able to point that out and still acknowledge that we got our eye on class struggle, we got our eye on imperial policy, and we got our eye on the magnificent humanity of poor people and working people wherever they are.
The key, though, right, is that the oppressive systems of other regimes are not going to be fixed by the oppressive system of American empire.
That's
right.
Exactly right. Oh, you 120% right on that. Absolutely. Right. That's exactly right.
I don't think this should come as any surprise because we wouldn't have expected anything less from Wasserman Schultz. But I assume that you probably have a pretty strong opinion about what she's doing right now, running in a predominantly people of color district in South Florida. And again, this isn't just any district. This is a very working class district that has suffered mightily under her congressional rule, even though she hasn't represented these communities directly, but her policies and influence on Capitol Hill cannot be denied. It goes without saying that I think too much of the country doesn't understand how serious of an issue it is when somebody, when people say, oh, you want somebody of color to be representing community of color. Well, here's the thing. In this case, you're talking about a person who not only has been in favor of policies that absolutely is to the detriment of these communities, but she hates these people. It's obvious that she does, that she has to go out and campaign with them. And at the same time, I find that and you were just alluding to this, that there are people within those communities that in many cases, and maybe this is just a reflection of capitalism, that they sort of aid and abet this monstrosity of a system by supporting somebody like her. Now, I don't know if it's going to work this time. We're hoping that it doesn't. We'll do our part to try to help. How do you look at a situation like this and how the continued subjugation of communities that are struggling, especially communities of color, and how it's coming from the Democratic side as if to say, because the Democrats are doing it, we don't need to really talk about this. But yet if it was a Republican doing it, you sure as heck know we would be hearing about it until the end of time. Your thoughts?
No, but brother, I think you laid it out with such clarity that you provide the sources of a powerful answer to your powerful question. that there's a double standard here, and white supremacist sensibilities are white supremacist sensibilities. Wherever you find it, you bring critique to bear. I'd say the same thing about patriarchy. I'd say the same thing about homophobia. I'd say the same thing about transphobia. I'd say the same thing about any hatred against the people. Muslims, Arabs, Jews, whoever it is, Italians, Catholics, and so forth, right? These are moral issues. And you would think that someone in the hierarchy of the Democratic Party could have a conversation with Sister Deborah and say, you know exactly what you're doing. Do you know the level of disrespect this sends? Do you know the level of disregard this sends? What is going on? Well, you don't have that because the Democratic Party does not have mechanisms of accountability in place when it comes to certain neoliberal elites like her. Wasn't she head of the Democratic Party committee for a good while?
5 years.
5
You know, what's amazing
years.
is that she was the head of the DNC at the time, and I think it may still be. She was the longest running DNC chair that they've ever had. And if what went down didn't go down, Lord knows how many more years she would have been in that position.
That's exactly right. And that just, it speaks for the worst of a neoliberal ruling class party that is so tied into various kinds of policies that have nothing to do with the empowering of poor and working people. Nothing whatsoever.
My greatest fear, as I'm sure Jen agrees, I'm sure you do too, that the Democratic Party is going to welcome every last one of the Zionist coalition into their party. If the Republicans are going to continue to move in the direction of a more America First libertarian-esque movement, and by that measure, because if the most loud and prominent voices in this country are the likes of Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens saying that we are doing away with this unholy alliance with Israel, and yet when I look at the Democratic side, you could say Hassan Piker, but Hassan is also fiercely loyal to the Democratic Party. And so once you get away from that, who really is out there saying what needs to be said? Because if you're going to have a break, you have to have a clean break, especially on this. Like if genocide is not a red line, then what is?
Absolutely. Absolutely, though, brother.
Jen?
Are you asking me about my red line? I'm not sure where you're going. My red line was crossed like 20 something years ago when I mean, we're so far past that. I don't even. But, I don't believe in borders and imaginary lines and all of that stuff that you like too. So,
Well, I believe that I believe that culture matters. I do believe that there's many different things that different cultures have to offer. What I always find interesting is if you go to Southern California, especially in LA and San Diego County, people that will complain about Mexicans, and yet they love Mexican culture, their food.
They shouldn't be allowed to have tacos. Anybody who has no tacos for them. Like, that's ridiculous. I can't stand people that crap on that and then they think they're entitled to good Mexican food.
Well, then there was a great meme that I saw online of the difference between going to a white person's barbecue and a black person's barbecue, and they simply showed the difference between the macaroni and cheese.
It is a big difference. That is a big
one side, which is the white side, is like this bland, Kraft mac and cheese. And then on the other side, the black family does like the breadcrumbs and the roasting, and it's gooey and crunchy, and it's delicious. Yeah. And and that's why I think food is also one of the great equalizers when it comes to bringing people together. But I just think right now we're reaching a point where I think a lot of those barriers are being broken down because economically it is getting bad, like really bad. And we're also of the mind that, and I was in California recently, gasoline is $6 a gallon there. That's nothing compared to where it's going. It's going to get even worse than that. And so when people are looking around saying, oh, yeah, let's just complain about the culture war now. No, it is the class war. It has always been the class war. And that is the only thing that the people in power care about. You talk about why you don't have enough, make enough money to live. That's when they're going to start doing stuff. That's why even though we have our disagreements with Ro Khanna, he has been doing a good job. And the fact that Elon Musk feels the need to single him out specifically, like he's like a criminal, I'm like, oh, well, whatever Ro's doing is clearly making an impact, because if you're pissing Elon off, that's when you know that's when you're doing something right. That's what I see. And your thoughts as we wind down the conversation, where you think things are going in terms of the class solidarity, which is obviously the key to whatever type of rebellion or revolution we have coming.
Well, I'm glad both of you all are accenting these issues of class solidarity. But you can't have class solidarity unless you have persons who have enough courage to cut against the grain of the neoliberal forms of what used to be called identity politics. That doesn't mean that you don't have commitments to Black people and brown people and indigenous people and so forth, but you have a moral and a spiritual vision that takes you beyond simply the neoliberal expressions of those kinds of identities. I like what Brother Mamdani talked about when he invoked the great Antonio Gramsci. This is very important. Now Antonio Gramsci, in the prison notebooks, those notebooks were translated by the father of Pete Buttigieg, Joe Buttigieg, who was my very dear brother. He was from Malta. He was professor at Notre Dame, was one of the founders of Boundary 2, was one of the great left journals, along with Social Text and Socialist Review, when I was coming along, in the 20s. In my 20s and 30s. And Joseph Buttigieg would always highlight that interregnum, where the old was dying, the new not yet born. It actually goes back partly to Matthew Arnold too, but Gramsci accents that. And in such a moment, there's unpredictability. You just don't know. There might be major breaks within the Democratic Party who think seriously of a critique of the corporate duopoly that we're talking about, and then we're in a different moment. We tried to get Bernie to break in 2016 in Philadelphia, right? That's what Chris Hedges and the rest of us were trying to do with Bernie after, I and Nina Turner and others had done over 75 events with our dear brother. But he decided not to. I love the brother. I just disagree. I couldn't see how they were going to treat him with respect. How do you go back to those folks, Bernie? Tell me. Well, he did. Well, he made his own decision and made his way within the Democratic Party. And we get the backlash, the neo-fascist backlash against the failure of neoliberal rule. But with a white supremacist public face. And that's where it becomes very important. It was very important for me to be with Bernie. Why? Because this is one of the few times one of the most progressive communities in the history of the American empire, which is the Black community, did not support the most progressive candidate running for president.
Right.
Well, see, this is a very crucial moment. What's going on, as Marvin Gaye would raise the question? How come we couldn't translate in the way in which we should, so that the class solidarity would embrace the most progressive community in the history of the country, which is Black folk who are what? Disproportionately working class, disproportionately poor, but never confining our concerns just to them. I'll start there, but I'll spill over for that class solidarity and even anti-imperial solidarity that cuts in a variety of different ways, I would say. So I just don't know. In the interim, we got a lot of surprises that's going to come our way. We really do. And one crucial variable to keep in mind is the rebellious possibilities of the Black masses. If we had another George Floyd Jr., it's a whole different moment. It's a whole different moment. And that's not revolutionary, it is rebellious. It has some revolutionary possibilities if the institutions were in place, infrastructure were in place, the right kind of leadership with moral character were in place. We don't have that. But that's one thing that we have not had up until now. Because in that situation, all of a sudden, we need a racial reckoning again. You remember all that dialogue that goes on every time a Black person is publicly lynched? Oh, we need a racial reckoning. And in the reckoning, where's the class solidarity? Not enough talk about it.
Right.
In the reckoning, where's the critique of U.S. imperial policy in Gaza and other places, Haiti and so forth? Not a lot of talk about it, but we know where people are has much to do with those police, that poverty, decrepit schools, unavailable child care, unavailable health care, ... So we just don't know. I don't think any of us can really project what's going to happen in the next 2, 4, 5, 8 years. The one thing I hope we can be convinced of is that we are going to be forces for truth and justice, in the language of John Coltrane, forces of good tied to a love supreme. We have to make decisions ourselves in our own lives in terms of the kind of human beings we choose to be in this particular moment of the interregnum as the American empire continues to unravel the new possibilities for poor and working people here and around the world begin to become manifest. Just don't know.
Just don't know.
You're one of our
Thank you
favorites.
so much, Dr. West. It's so good to see. It always it does the heart good to see you. That's how it feels. It does the heart good.
Yeah.
Well, you
And
all are
reason
so
to believe.
kind.
That's what we need. And you are a testament to that. And if we're making you proud, then we're definitely doing something right.
No, well, you all, the force were good. In fact, when I got the call, and my beloved wife Anahita says, "Now you know, honey, these two are special ones." I said, "Oh, I know, I know, it's true." Because I get a lot of calls, I can't respond to each and every one of them, but I remember you all, and she reminded me of both of you and Sister Jen and Brother Peter. I just say, just keep on holding up a bloodstained banner of truth and beauty, because we want to get the arts in here and the music and the culture, tied to class struggle, tied to anti-imperial solidarity, and tied to trying to lead the world just a little better than we found it before we go.
Amen, my friend.
Have a good one.
Stay strong. Stay strong now.
Thank you, sir.
All right.
How could you not love that guy?
I can't contain it. I can't.
And you know,
and you know what's so sad to me? I need to at some point see him in person again and do a photo reshoot, because my one picture of me and Dr. West is so sad and blurry, and this stupid girl who was taking it didn't even know who that was, and she was stupid, and it was just yeah. So I have a blurry and yet sad photo of me and Dr. West together.
You know, the thing that he brought up at the very end, which I think is very true, and it would have required us to have an even lengthier conversation. But, you know, the thing he brought up about the arts and culture and that type of thing, if there is something that I can definitively say that has been one of the worst aspects of the whole Trump phenomenon, is the complete disillusionment and disregard for the arts, for culture. It can't be ignored. And I'm just thinking out loud. I mean, you know, he hits a lot of good points as far as that's concerned. But again,
he understands the interconnectedness of the universe.
Yes.
And that is something that people don't understand. Everything is intersected, and he sees that very clearly. He has a very good understanding of the interconnectedness of the different issues.
Well, we're going old school tonight. We are having back-to-back guests. We haven't done this.
Yeah.
But sometimes that's what you have to do to accommodate, because scheduling is everything, especially right now, because got to have some very important voices. Let's go from Dr. West. Let's go to Caleb Maupin, because we recognize this moment that we're in right now is, whether it is, as Dr. West said, rebellious, or is it revolutionary? Maybe it's both. And for somebody who has written a lot of books, who has shared a lot of his thoughts through his YouTube channel and a lot of other mediums, he has been doing some excellent work. We're very pleased for the first time, and hopefully not the last time, to welcome Caleb Maupin to Revolutionary Change.
Hey, how you doing?
Hi, nice to meet you. I feel like I've seen you, but I've never met you. It's nice to meet you.
Well, there you go. Familiarity is a great thing.
Yes.
Yeah. Caleb, what has been, from your perspective right now, because obviously, you know, you've been on a number of different channels. Kim Iverson is a friend. You've been really like not holding back. I mean, people call you a radical, but I think you're just a truth teller. And I guess telling the truth these days is considered radical. Where do you see things going in this moment, especially in lieu of what's happening in Iran? And I mean, I personally think that Iran has the checkmate because they hold the key to our economic survival in many respects. The Strait of Hormuz is basically closed off, then we are looking at economic catastrophe. And Iran has made it very clear you have two choices. Either you do it our way or you can go with Israel and be screwed. How do you see it unfolding at this point?
Well, you have to put it in the context of what's going on the bigger picture. We've got a global economic system rooted in colonialism, the old order of Wall Street and London running the world. That system is in a severe crisis and it can no longer function. And around the world, we're seeing countries that have broken out of that system that are continuing to rise. And the desperation on the part of our leaders is rising. Living standards are going down here in the Western countries, and they are getting more and more desperate. And Iran has endured. I mean, the United States was not willing to make the sacrifices on the battlefield that it would have taken to forcibly reopen the Strait of Hormuz. So Iran has brought the United States to the table. Now, I have questions. Is this real on the part of the White House? Is the White House really just upset with Israel and wants to give Iran a good deal and Israel is opposing it? Or is this just kind of a good cop, bad cop routine? I don't really know what's going on behind the scenes. It does look to me like J.D. Vance is trying to make sure that he can have a presidential run in 2028 and not be tainted by this war. If he can be seen as the guy who solved it, as the guy who maybe stood up to Netanyahu and solved it, that'll certainly frame him well if he runs in 2028. And so, you know, this war, look, the Trump administration, I mean, their second term here has been an absolute betrayal of so many of the people who voted for them. No new wars. Here we are. Solving the inflation. Here we are. I mean, Trump has slapped in the face millions of people who voted for him because they saw him as at odds with the political establishment. And right now, the country is not happy. The midterms are not going to go well for the Republicans, but we have a Democratic Party that you all on this podcast have shown is not much better and is very much, I mean, serving the same forces. So what is going to come next? That is the question.
Well, to me, that's one of the great fears. And we have been sounding the alarm that if you're really paying attention, with a few exceptions like Chris Rabe and maybe Brad Lander, there's a few of them out there, but in the grand scheme of things, the Democratic Party establishment has made it very clear to the Zionist entity, if you are rejected by the Republicans and their growing America First movement, you're more than welcome to come into our fold. We'll have you in a heartbeat. They are not hiding the fact that this is a shell game and they don't care if it provokes some type of a revolution because in their mind, they just don't think Americans have it in them to actually fight the government. They look at something like January 6th and think that that's what a revolution looks like. No, it isn't. It's much deeper than that. And that's where it's going to be interesting as we go forward. How much more can people be poked at before they say, I've had enough? Well, Jen and I are both of the mind that the economic pain in this country is going to get so much worse in the very near future. That's the big issue.
Yeah, you have to think of it kind of like a drug addict, because that's the relationship America has with war, right? When someone first starts taking drugs, they're doing it to have fun, recreational or whatever, but it gets to the point that it becomes a habit, that becomes something they need. They need it just to feel normal. And then after that, the normal that they feel gradually gets worse and worse and worse. And that's the way it is with war. When war started out, it was a little bit of a stimulus. It helped stabilize the economy. And then we got more and more reliant on it and more reliant on it. Now this system cannot continue without constant wars. This is what Rosa Luxemburg wrote about in her famous Junius pamphlet that she composed at the beginning of World War I, where she said, there will come a time where these kinds of ugly wars are the constant necessity. And she compared it to the fall of the Roman Empire. And that's the period that we're living in. And that fascism, the real scientific definition of fascism is trying to stabilize capitalism with degrowth methods, trying to destroy productive forces, create a slave labor underclass, and reboot the economy with degrowth. That's what fascism really is. Look, capitalism is the only system in history where abundance creates poverty. People become homeless, because there are too many houses. People become hungry because there is too much food. Abundance creates poverty. In a rational society, if we had self-driving cars, that would be a great thing because the chore called driving would no longer be necessary. But in our highly irrational system, self-driving cars would mean all the Uber drivers out of work, all the truck drivers out of work, all the traffic courts and state highway patrolmen out of work. It would be an economic disaster. That's not rational. Right. And when you have a system where profits are in command and production and the whole economy centers around maximizing profits for a private group of owners, you get a situation where the more efficient technology becomes and the easier it is to produce products, the poorer society gets and the more unstable the economy is. That's not rational. And that's the problem that we have. And, during the Great Depression, they had a prolonged crisis of overproduction, which is what we've got right now. They had a prolonged crisis. And the method of trying to stabilize the economy in Nazi Germany was they created a slave labor underclass of concentration camp inmates. They restarted military spending and they were able to eradicate unemployment and reboot, the German economy for 2 or 3 years. But then after 2 or 3 years, they were right back where they started and they launched World War II as a way of trying to keep things going. And that fascism is degrowth. It is an attempt to stabilize the capitalist economy by engaging in destruction. And when we hear the ultra rich at the World Business Forum talking about, they have these dark, high-tech dystopian visions of, you'll own nothing, you'll live in a pod, you'll eat bugs, and you'll be happy about it. That's Malthusianism. That's what they've always wanted from the time of Margaret Sanger and the Rockefeller family right up to today. The understanding is for them to stay at the top of the world has got to stop growing and they've got to drive down the population. And so they've got to stay at the top and they can't let humanity keep growing, even though that's the nature of humanity. We are a growth-oriented species that builds and expands, etc. They've got to stay at the top. So humanity has just got to be, shoved downward and destroyed in order to keep them at the top indefinitely. And that's Malthusianism, and that's the vision that the ultra-rich have. And they frame it in terms of environmentalism, but I don't think it's really concerned about environment. Look, if you want to get beyond fossil fuels, what about fusion energy, right? China is doing great research on getting us beyond fossil fuels to something even higher. And I think, yeah, fossil fuels are a problem. I don't deny global warming, but the answer is to get to a higher energy source, to a higher level of energy flux density. That's what we need. And that's the reality, but they don't want that. The answer is, well, because of climate change, we've all just got to be poorer and we've got to wage wars around the world against Iran or Venezuela or Cuba or Russia or China or any country that's broken out of our dominion. They're trying to save a naturally unstable system. This is globalism, imperialism, monopolistic capitalism in its death throes, dealing with the reality of when you have a system where profits are in command, it can't handle technological innovations. And humanity is a creative species. We've gotten beyond the artificial restraints and restrictions of this highly irrational system.
And that's exactly why we're so far behind China. That's the part that I think people really don't understand. You look around right now, especially in light of the response that is being exhibited by everyone from all corners of the earth, particularly a lot of the citizenry here when it comes to the genocide in Gaza, the continued attempted genocide in southern Lebanon, and now we're seeing what Iran is doing. And yet, at the same time, as I'm sure you know, many of you in the audience probably know as well, JNS held their conference in Jerusalem over the weekend, and this is the nonsense that Zio scum like Ayman Cohen had to say regarding what's the future of Israel hold right now. You might be surprised.
One threat from America is the Muslim Brotherhood. CARE and the Muslim Brotherhood are trying to take over now Florida and Texas. And first they take Florida, then they take Texas, and then America falls. New York already took over. Now, it's not only a threat for America, it's a threat for Israel. In 15 years from now, Israel will have a war with Egypt. The Muslim Brotherhood will eventually take over Egypt. The Muslim Brotherhood, which is a Sunni jihad, now after we weaken the Shia jihad, will be a threat to the world. Turkey is now taking over. Fidam Khan, what's his name? The foreign minister, Hakam Fidan, the foreign minister of Turkey, announced that we took Haleb, we took Damascus, and Jerusalem is next. The Sunni jihad is the next enemy. Israel needs to be strong. America needs to be strong. Unfortunately.
Oh, cannot. That's so funny to me. I've met the CARE Florida people. I've met them. They're not trying to take over. That's the thing. I want to know who he's talking about. Also, the Muslim Brotherhood has nothing to do with anything that we're talking about. I don't know what he's talking about.
Well, I mean, they just like to make things up. But this level of disconnect, and this is also one of the things that we've talked about at great length regarding the class war. When you're talking about the average Zionist, especially when they're Jewish, they are coming from the highest rungs of society. Their disconnect to working people is not only profound in number, but their supremacist ideology truly makes them look at everybody else like, well, you're totally expendable as far as we're concerned. So even though it looks like we're in not good shape, we're still going to push forward with this nonsense. Your thoughts?
Well, it's interesting. He's talking about the Muslim Brotherhood, and it is interesting. This does seem to be a difference between Democrats and Republicans. The Muslim Brotherhood was started in Egypt in the 1920s. In the 1950s, it became a vehicle for the United States to work against the president of Egypt, Abdel Nasser, who was like an Arab socialist. And the USA backed the Muslim Brotherhood to kind of work against the Arab socialist leader, Abdel Nasser. And the Muslim Brotherhood, I mean, it exists throughout the Middle East. It's kind of, they call them westernized Muslims, right? Their teaching is that that America is more Muslim than the Muslim world. The Muslim world needs to adopt the free market capitalist system, and that capitalism is fine as long as you are a good Muslim and donate to charity, etc. That's the Muslim Brotherhood current, and they have been friends of the liberal CIA. They were key in bringing down the Assad government in Syria. They were key in bringing down Gaddafi. However, Hamas started out as the Palestinian wing of the Muslim Brotherhood. And the Muslim Brotherhood tends to be on the side of the United States in pretty much every country in the world, except when it comes to Israel, Palestine. They are very anti-Israel because they're Muslims. And so meanwhile, Saudi Arabia has outlawed the Muslim Brotherhood. Saudi Arabia are Wahhabis. They're Sunni Muslims, but they're like the opposite interpretation. They, instead of wanting to modernize and be like the West, they're saying that you want to go back to the 1400s. We want to go back to like a strict autocratic medieval kind of system. And it tends to be, I've noticed, Republicans, the Bush administration, Ronald Reagan, even up to Trump, they like Saudi Arabia. They want to sell weapons to Saudi Arabia. They like Saudi oil. Whereas it tends to be the liberals, the Obamas, the Clintons that like the Muslim Brotherhood. And, and that's kind of a divide. And every so often Trump will come out and say, oh, I want to ban the Muslim Brotherhood. Well, he's kind of, they're playing games. The USA has different allies and different proxies throughout the Middle East region. And I've noticed, the main funders of the Muslim Brotherhood wing of Islam at this point are Turkey and Qatar, right? Whereas Saudi Arabia is associated with Wahhabism. Obama's strategy in the Middle East, which has completely failed. I mean, it really escalated during the Obama administration. Trump tried it in his first term. The idea was to polarize the peoples of the Middle East, the Muslims of the Middle East, between Sunni and Shia. Iran is a Shia country. The majority of the Muslims in the Middle East are Sunnis, and you have the Sunni Wahhabis around Saudi Arabia, and you have the Sunni, the westernized Sunnis that are around the Muslim Brotherhood. And the idea was to play up the idea that Iran is trying to take over the Middle East and create a Shia crescent or a Shia empire. And so they were going to unify, the Sunni Muslims to fight Iran and divide the Sunni and Shia of the Middle East. And that was kind of the strategy. And part of, the war in Syria, the way the Obama administration pushed it, and the way the Muslim Brotherhood was key and all of that, that was kind of the strategy. But October 7th and the aftermath has kind of thrown it on its head, because everyone can see now that the forces that are battling Israel and fighting against Israel are aligned with Iran. They are Shia Muslims, whether it's Hezbollah in Lebanon, whether it's Ansar Allah or the Houthis in Yemen, and whether it's Iran itself that is being targeted by Israel and by the United States. Every Muslim who opposes Israel can see that the real champions of the Palestinians, the true allies of the Palestinians, are aligned with Iran. So playing up the idea that Shia Muslims are no good, or false Muslims or apostates, that's just not a winning line in the Muslim world anymore. And that strategy that the Obama administration used to try and divide the Muslims on the basis of that, isolate Iran on the basis of them being Shia, that strategy has completely fallen apart. And at this point, the world is so horrified by Israel's crimes, and Iran is clearly the one fighting Israel. Iran has regained a lot of respect and a lot of credibility. I think, when we talk about the Democrats, the folks at Black Agenda Report used to say they're not the lesser of two evil, they're the more effective evil, right? They're the more, yeah. And that Obama was smart about it. Their idea was, we're not just going to say all Muslims are terrorists and Israel is great. We're gonna give a bone. We'll negotiate with Iran and we'll court the Muslim Brotherhood as allies, and we'll kind of play this long-term manipulative game that was thought up in think tanks, right? This is the Council on Foreign Relations and the Asia Society, and they've dreamed up these kind of long-term schemes for ensuring the dominance of Wall Street all over the world. But a lot of the people among the rich and powerful, they just want to make money. And that, that long-term strategy that Obama had of kind of dividing the Muslims of the world while negotiating with Iran and perhaps sinking American influence into Iran and pulling off a color revolution among the younger generation, that strategy got in the way of Netanyahu's political career. He needs an Iranian threat in order to get reelected. And it also cut into the profits of the military-industrial complex. If Iran is not a threat, how are you going to sell loads and loads of weapons all throughout the region to all the other countries? And so basically a more effective strategy for Wall Street was nullified because it cut into the short-term interests of certain entities. And that's kind of how we've seen this play out, is the Iran nuclear deal may have been a more effective mechanism, but it was overruled.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, you hit it right on the head. If it's not profitable, and that's why war is so common, that's what it comes down to. And in many ways, if you're not fighting, you're not profiting. And of course, guys like this look at it as, well, we need the plebs to go out there and die for us so we can get richer. So we'll finish it out.
Weak. Now, imagine you're an Israeli prime minister today, and you understand that in 15 years you're going to have a war with Egypt, and you don't know who's going to be the prime minister, the president of the United States in 15 years from now. What do you do today to address that challenge? Even if it's an American one, the Muslim Brotherhood takes Texas and Florida, imagine where America can be. That's a threat not only to Israel, not to Western society, it's a threat to mankind.
Well, no. The only threat to mankind is the state of Israel, because right now they are the one nation in the world that I believe that if push came to shove, and Lord knows they may be heading in that direction, that would actually drop a nuclear bomb if they needed to. So that to me has always been the Samson option. Of course, that's what it's called, would be of a great risk to all of us. And that's part of the reason why you see things like this. And then you see things like this with Colonel Kemp. This is so insane that, I mean, again, I think obviously the primary reason why people make statements like this is because they're looking for a paycheck. I understand that. But at the same time, when you talk like this, it just creates even greater fervor towards the Israel cause, which in some ways you can laugh at the statement, but then realize you're cultivating more support against Israel, which, let's face it, at this point, we need as much as we can get.
I speak as a goy, a mere goy. The Jews were put on the face of the earth to be a light unto nations. And Israel is being that light in defense of its own country. And I think most particularly, not just in military technology, but in the way in which those extraordinary men and women of the IDF have shown the world how to fight. And many countries in Western Europe, which are going to face this violence, will be looking to Israel to see how they're going to fight. So the narrative is one thing, but action, I think, is even more important.
Good boy. You did your job. If anybody's looking at the IDF for direction, women and children who are unarmed. That's it. Pretty much everybody else, they run and hide like the cowards they are. Is this some type of humiliation ritual that so many of these potential, I guess, paid propagandists have to go through in order to display their loyalty for the Zionist cause? Is that what this is about?
Well, look, he's speaking for the British elite, right? The British Empire created Zionism. Christian Zionism, invented by the British elite, predates Jewish Zionism. Before there was Theodore Herzl, there were British theologians writing about, oh, we need to send the Jews back to Palestine and set up a state because of the Bible and blah, 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 blah. And then Theodore Herzl came along and he realized that so many Jewish folks were becoming socialists and leftists, and that was a threat to the power structure, and that he feared that there would be unity between Jews and non-Jews among the working class of Europe. And so he came up with this political movement called Zionism, which was the notion that Jews can never assimilate into European society. They're just so different. They're just so special. They have to have their own state. And he pitched it to the wealthy British elite, including the Rothschilds, but not only the Rothschilds, many non-Jewish wealthy British bankers and imperialists. And he said, look, you've got Rhodesia to be your settler state in Southern Africa. You've got other settler states around the world. Why don't we Jews, will never fit in? Why don't we be the settler colony for you in the Middle East, and we'll defend your interests? And when the Balfour Declaration came down with the Sykes-Picot Agreement, et cetera, we saw the settlers in Palestine acting as agents of the British and protecting pipelines, et cetera. And then the Arab people revolted against them, and Britain sent its military in the 1930s to protect the settlers. And all of that then led to the creation of Israel in 1948. So I think that, he's pandering to that ideology when he uses those words. He says, I'm a mere goy. But he's speaking to what has been the interests of the globalist imperialist system for a long time. The Zionist ideology was fomented by the power structure, by the British Empire for their own ends, and has been that. And it wasn't until the Holocaust that it had a majority among the Jewish population. Until the Holocaust, the majority of Jewish people rejected Zionism and saw themselves as social democrats or communists or whatever. But after the Jews in Europe were killed in the Holocaust, and after British Jewish folks had kind of dominance, and after the horrendous events of the Holocaust, Zionism was able to get the upper hand, and we saw the creation of the state of Israel. And there were even a lot of leftists who were confused. Israel was pitching itself like it was going to be some socialist commune in the desert, right? I mean, the early years of it, I know a lot of leftists who said they sold trees for Israel while they sold the Daily Worker back in the 1950s, right? And it was pitching itself as a leftist cause. And it wasn't really until the 70s that Israel just kind of came to terms with the fact that it was a right-wing settler colonial project. I mean, the rise of Menachem Begin kind of confirmed that. But there was always an underlying kind of fascist current, right? The revisionist current, right? You had the mainstream Zionism of Theodore Herzl that was trying to be liberal and social democratic and sugar, spice, everything nice. But then you had the revisionist party that said, oh, what Hitler wants to do for the Germans and what Mussolini is doing for the Italians, that's what we want to do for the Jews. And, the forces that laid the basis for the Likud party, the right-wing Zionists, the revisionist party, and Oppenheimer and people like that were very open about the fact that they were a nationalist and supremacist group. They even carried out Irgun, which was their armed wing during the Second World War, carried out attacks against the British. They were hoping for a Nazi victory because they believed it would lead to all the Jews fleeing Europe and having to move to Palestine, right? And that there was a whole ugly history there. So this kind of thing is obscured. And if you just bring up any of this, people call you anti-Semitic, they call you a conspiracy theorist, but this is the reality. And that President Roosevelt, he was one of the biggest opponents of Zionism, and he was opposed to it. And in fact, I believe it was somebody named Niles who worked in the White House said that if Roosevelt had not died immediately after the Second World War, Israel would have never come into existence. That Roosevelt, he said, no, you can't create a Zionist state right there in Palestine. You just can't do that. And he died. And then it was Harry Truman who ultimately created Israel and was key in doing that. So President Roosevelt, he just said, look, I mean, that he saw that this was not going to be a successful project. And that's why the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C. is dedicated to defaming Roosevelt, right? Roosevelt convinced a reluctant U.S. public to send their sons to die in the Second World War. Roosevelt was loved by American Jews as an anti-fascist, as an anti-racist, as someone who fought for the working class and created Social Security and unemployment insurance. But the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C. is almost dedicated to tarnishing his memory, trying to make it look like he was somehow complicit in the Holocaust because he opposed the project of creating Israel. Roosevelt was anti-Israel. He was a friend of Jewish people. He actually, he appointed the Secretary of Treasury, Henry Morgenthau, et cetera. I mean, he was not an anti-Semite, but yet that's what is out there, and that's a big part of the Zionist narrative, is that Roosevelt was somehow this bloodthirsty anti-Semite. There's a level of anti-populism underneath all of this, and when I talk about the Trotskyite to neocon pipeline, I've written a lot about this. Trotsky very much, he did not like the Russian people. He had been a victim of anti-Semitic pogroms and persecution. And for him, the Russian Revolution was only supposed to be a mechanism of spreading communism to Europe where it really mattered. And his contempt for the peasantry and his theory of permanent revolution was largely kind of an anti-populism. And, the break between Stalin and Trotsky, and the way Trotsky writes about Stalin and calls him Asiatic, baits him over his Christian background and all of that. Trotskyism was largely kind of an anti-populism. And as we saw the Trotskyites start working with the CIA, with the Congress for Cultural Freedom program in the 1950s, and how the CIA started courting like leftist intellectuals to make anti-Soviet propaganda that would appeal to leftists, and opposing McCarthyism while also waging kind of cancel culture campaigns against Lillian Hellman and Albert Einstein and people like that for being too sympathetic to the Soviet Union. And it was Irving Kristol who ran that program, a Trotskyist, and he eventually became the father of neoconservatism. And if you read Leo Strauss and what the neocons believe, it's anti-populism. They see Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union as the same thing, that's absurd. The Soviet Union saved humanity from Hitler. They see them as the same thing, and they see them both as examples of excessive democracy, that deep down, average people are just bloodthirsty anti-Semites and bloodthirsty authoritarians. And if they get their way, they'll create some kind of totalitarian state. And what makes America great is that we protect the intellectuals and we brainwash and control the average people so they don't get in their way. And that's the philosophy of Leo Strauss. That's the philosophy of Irving Kristol. And you can kind of see a continuity of that from Trotsky all the way up into modern neoconservatism and hardline Zionism. It is contempt for the people, the belief that the people are the enemy and the people are dangerous. And I see that in some of what we hear from the Democrats and their anti-populism, the way they see Trump and the Bernie Sanders movement is the same. They're both dangerously populist. They think populism is the greatest enemy. And that seems to be the narrative that defines, American politics. That's what you learn if you go to the university. You learn that the people are the enemy, that postmodernism teaches that there is no grand narrative. There's no way of understanding human history. There is no real truth. And anyone who tries to create any real truth is a totalitarian who's trying to control you and set up an authoritarian movement. This is the kind of thinking that has become dominant in academia. And you can see how all of this is connected.
Jen, could you share your thoughts on, obviously, your family experience? There is this belief, especially from Eastern Europeans, particularly Russians and Polish people that escaped, during the days of the pogroms, that's where a lot of the growth and the Zionist movement actually came from. But Jen, what are your thoughts?
That's of course what created the fury amongst the Jews in this country, for sure. And I know, like, my family was very much, there was like this generational trauma. My grandparents, my great-grandparents, everything was about Israel because it wasn't a religious thing at all for them. That's what people need to understand. It was extremely secular. It was, the Israel issue was about their perceived safety. And it was made very clear to me growing up that if there's no Israel, Jews are not safe in the world. Like, that was the key message that I was raised with as a Zionist. And so it was fear-based. And since really understanding what's happened with this, like coming to the deconstruction of my Zionist upbringing, is this knowledge that Jewish people, especially working Jewish people, like my family, they're not Rothschilds, right? Like, my people came over here with nothing, and my great-grandfather had like an apple cart, right? Like, this is not, these people were used by the Zionists. These were not people that knew anything about what was going on. My great-grandmother, these people believed the land without a people for a people without a land. They really did. And again, these are not exceptionally bright people. These were not educated people, right? So it was easy in a fear-based mentality to really go in and just take advantage. That's what I believe. And for the majority of the Jews that fell in line, it was not religious based.
Caleb, if you could talk more about, obviously the name of your book is Trotsky and the Neoconservatives, the whole story. So the essence of the Trotskyism is essentially what led to neoconservatism. This whole, everywhere you turn is basically a war. Like we have to constantly be at war. And you see parallels between Trotsky and Netanyahu Milikowski, I would assume.
Well, the thing is that wherever you go in the world, you find two types of people who become socialists or communists. You find two types. No matter where you go in the world, you're going to have what you call like a revolutionary intelligentsia, right? The young college kids who are, want to go out and fight the system and, the red flags and Les Miserables. Do you hear the people sing? And it's that kind of youthful rebellion. And you have that anywhere, right? Near the universities and major cities. You have this in the developing world. You have this in Europe. It's kind of the legacy of the French Revolution. But generally, when a country actually does have a revolution, you get a much broader movement, and that what the broad masses of people want is they want stability. And it's capitalism that has made their life unstable. They can't pay their bills. Society is falling apart. There's wars going on, and they want peace, land, and bread. They want society to become stable. And that radical middle class, they kind of long for chaos and instability, and they want to tear down every wall and behead every last king. And there's that kind of bloodlust of the middle class versus the wider interests of the population that just kind of want stability. And they have chaos already, and they want stability, and they're turning to socialism or a socialist or an anti-colonial movement to bring them stability. And that the brilliance of Lenin was that Lenin kind of brought a lot of these radical middle-class elements together and got them into a very disciplined organization that could then give voice to the broader sentiments of the population. And that's what led to the Russian Revolution. But after the death of Lenin, you had Stalin and Trotsky, who kind of represented these two different wings. Trotsky had spent most of his life in exile in Vienna, in London, in New York City. He called New York City the foundry where the fate of mankind will be forged. And he was very much part of this radical middle class that wanted chaos. Whereas Stalin, there's a band that played at Woodstock called Country Joe and the Fish. Well, their name came from the fact that they were named after Stalin and Mao, right? Stalin was Country Joe because he grew up in the countryside, and Mao was the fish because he said the masses are the water and the revolutionaries are the fish. And Stalin was from a rural village in Georgia. He had been in seminary school learning to be a priest, and he dropped out. And he represented kind of this mass organizing aspect, and that he was the editor of Pravda, which was the daily newspaper that the Bolsheviks had that was largely anonymous letters about factory conditions and workplace conditions. And he was the organizer of the kind of rank and file labor unionists and activists who made the Bolshevik Party, whereas Trotsky represented the kind of radical middle class intellectuals who were in exile. And then when the crisis came, they came back and led the revolution. And that Trotsky wanted permanent revolution. That's his theory that defined himself. Stalin said we can build socialism in one country, and Trotsky said we need permanent revolution. We need to spread the revolution all over the world. The Soviet Union should just be a temporary holdout to, march communism into Europe and have a giant bloodbath and destroy the whole Western system. And Trotskyism, the reason that it leads to neoconservatism is the aesthetics, the psychology of Trotskyism applied to serve imperialism. It's selling wars as revolutions. It's overthrowing regimes around the world. It's that love of chaos and instability, that idea that we're going to march the ideals of freedom and justice all over the world at the point of a gun. It's that love of chaos. It is that kind of desire to be fighting for the downtrodden, to punish the oppressor. It is that applied to serve imperialism. And it really started with the Congress for Cultural Freedom program in the 1950s. At Waldorf Hotel in New York City, the Soviet Union did a great thing. They had the Waldorf Peace Conference, and Albert Einstein and Shostakovich and Aaron Copland and all these great writers and intellectuals got up and spoke in support of the Soviet Union, and the CIA was furious. How can this be happening? It was McCarthyism at the time, but yet so many smart people were willing to get up and defend the USSR. And so they said, we need to find a way to get to the artists and the intellectuals and the writers who would become communists and get them on our side. And that's how they started the Congress for Cultural Freedom program. And they started subsidizing various artists and writers, and they hired a lot of these Trotskyites to write for these magazines that went everywhere. You had Partisan Review magazine, which looked like a socialist communist magazine that was on every college campus, but it was being covertly funded by the CIA. And they made a lot of people famous. Mary McCarthy and Susan Sontag and Hannah Arendt all started with that publication. And that publication was a way of kind of inserting into radical and leftist circles an anti-Soviet message in a way that people could accept it, but at the same time changing what leftism entirely meant. For example, social realism is the school of art that Roosevelt and his administration promoted. In the Kansas State Capitol building, there's a beautiful painting of John Brown, the great abolitionist, anti-slavery fighter, and he's holding up his rifle in one hand. He's holding the Bible in his other hand. This is a social realist painting celebrating the movement to defeat slavery. And you have, the murals of Diego Rivera and others. Social realism was the leftist school of art that Roosevelt promoted, that the Soviet Union also promoted. Well, the CIA started funding abstract art to counter social realism, saying, well, social realism is totalitarian because it's promoting ideas. It's got strong, healthy people in it. So it's glorifying physical strength. And so we find Jackson Pollock, who just splatters paint on the canvas. That's what freedom is. Right. And if someone's trying to give you a political message that makes you feel inspired and want to go out and fight, that's totalitarianism. That's fascism. And I believe Susan Sontag, she famously blurted out in the 1980s, she said she considered communism to be nothing but the most effective form of fascism. And you read her writings on fascinating fascism, where she's talking about photo displays of African tribes and how, well, they're fascist because they're glorifying strength and they're showing the community coming together. It's like they kind of changed what it meant to be a leftist. Leftism was no longer about celebrating the masses of people asserting their economic interests and fighting against the rich and powerful. Leftism became kind of about the isolated intellectual who feels persecuted by the mob, and about, the right of the nonconformist and kind of contempt for average people. And leftism becomes reinvented with the New Left. And then the New Left, the same people who create the New Left, like Irving Kristol and others, end up bringing in neoconservatism because they see the anti-Vietnam War movement as too pro-Soviet, as too pro-Ho Chi Minh, as too pro-communist, and they're threatened by it. And especially with the 1967 war, when the Black Panthers and a lot of the student radicals are opposing Israel and supporting the Palestinians, they can't have that. And so 1972, that election is kind of a turning point where Max Shachtman, who'd been a big leader of American Trotskyism, who'd eventually become a prominent Democrat, and he ultimately gave his support to Richard Nixon, because he thought the Democratic candidate was too soft on communism, not anti-Stalinist enough. And, DSA, the Socialist Party of America, collapsed into three factions. And one faction is called the Socialist Party USA. They run in elections. They're like pacifists. And then you had the people who started Democratic Socialists of America, Michael Harrington and others. And then you had one faction, Social Democrats USA, with Max Shachtman and others, that actually went to support the Republicans because they just wanted to be so pro-Israel and so anti-communist. And so that's kind of the trajectory there that we start to see. And there is kind of a continuity there. In that book, I described an experience that I had that I will never forget. I was sitting in a diner in New York City when I was a leftist activist, and I was sitting in the diner talking to somebody about politics, and this old man with a cane walked over to the table. And he said, "Are you guys leftists? Are you guys communists?" And I said, yeah, we are. And he said, well, he said, my father, and he almost said it in this like whispering word, my father was a Trotskyist. And we just kind of laughed like, okay. And then he told the story of when he was a young man, he was protesting the Vietnam War, and he bought some kind of communist newspaper, and he was in his household, and his father was just a Republican, as far as he knew, a conservative Republican or whatever. And then his father had seen this communist newspaper, and he got very nervous, like, oh my God, my father's going to get angry. And his father burst into tears because he remembered when he had been a young man, when he had been a leftist activist as a young man, and he had never even known about this. this, right? And that, that trajectory, it's kind of fascinating, but yeah, it exists. And that you have to ask, like, what is it that you're striving for? Are you striving to build a society where people have jobs and healthcare and education and where economic growth and the human creative spirit is allowed to just freely grow? Or are we striving to create a society where we get revenge and we tear down every oppressor and, all of our anger comes out? And, what is it we're really going for? And I think that's the question that the book kind of gets into when I talk about Trotsky and the neoconservatives. What does it really mean to be a leftist? I mean, the terms come from the French Revolution. After they toppled the king, they created a national assembly. The more radical Jacobins sat on the left, the more conservative Girondists sat on the right, and the terms have caught on ever since. But what does it really mean to be left? What does it mean to be right? It's so much more confusing nowadays. And I think your podcast here, I've watched a number of your episodes, and you get that, right? What does it even mean to be left and right in our time?
Yeah.
Well, I think
We're not.
Yeah.
We're not.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
Well, people have no idea what they're talking about with that. I say it all the time. People don't even know what they mean. They don't know what liberal, conservative. They don't know what socialism, communism, Marxism. They don't know what these things really mean. They just say it. But our politics in this country doesn't have a left or right. We just have corporate. And then like a few smatterings of non-corporate people, but it's all the same. There is no left or right. I mean, the people here, like we're left. Like I feel left. I feel pretty accurately left. I'm almost back around to the right, but but it's not represented in any of our systems and in any of our politics. So that's why people have no concept of what is left. Right. I mean, that's what I think. I mean, I think left is communism, right is authoritarianism. And we know that, right? Like we know that, but most people don't know that. That's the problem.
And Caleb, I think this is a great place to wind down the conversation, because the thing that we've been talking about at great length is what is it going to take to unite the working class in this country? Now, I do think you're seeing some remnants of it, even in this America First movement that is taking off, because people are recognizing that there is indisputably a ruling class, that there is a select group of exceptionally wealthy individuals. And I think in some respects, the tipping point is the declaration that Musk is a trillionaire. I think people look at something like that in lieu of the fact that what people are also not getting, but they're going to get very shortly, is that if you think the economic catastrophe of starting this war with Iran on behalf of Israel has hit you yet economically, you haven't seen anything yet. This is going to get so much worse, regardless of whether they start it up again, which I'm not holding my breath at this point. Why, in your estimation, do you feel there isn't a greater sort of cross-pollination of all working class people? Because the divide and conquer strategy has seemed to have worked exceptionally well for quite some time, but maybe there's some breaks that are coming our way. What do you think?
The ideology that defines the West is liberalism, and liberalism not in the sense of liberals and conservatives, but Democrats and Republicans, but liberalism in the sense of individualism. The right pushes economic liberalism, the idea, hey, you're on your own, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, we don't owe you anything. And the left pushes social liberalism, the idea you can be who you want to be, you can do what you want to do. If you want to take drugs, that's your business, right? And also that you have no real obligation to society. You have no obligation to your family. You are just an individual. You're not part of a group, right? And liberalism, individualism kind of defines Western politics. The left emphasizes the social side. The right emphasizes the economic side. But neither side is really addressing the problem, which is that human beings are collective in nature, right? Every product in every store, no one can point at anything and say, I made that, right? You go to a store, show me one product that was made by one person. There isn't one, right? And you might say, what about like a wood carver or some artist? Okay, maybe that he carved that piece of wood by himself, but he's using tools that were made in a factory, that were assembled by thousands of people, that were shipped. Not everything we do is collective. Human beings are collective in nature, and we define ourselves in relation to other people. That's generally how we define ourselves. We are collective, and that individual rights is a good thing. It was great. I mean, until the West, until the rise of the West in 1400s, no one had talked about freedom of speech or freedom of assembly. And it wasn't that people were just evil until then. It was that a level of economic development enabled that level of freedom. And I'm glad to have that level of freedom. But at the same time, we have taken this individualism to some pretty extreme lengths, and we have societal problems that need to be solved in a collective sense, and that we ultimately have to break with liberalism. And that is kind of what is boiling beneath the surface, is that we need collective solutions. My organization, the Center for Political Innovation, we have a 4-point economic plan to rescue the country. Number one would be to hire all the unemployed and put them to work rebuilding the bridges and highways, and just do what Roosevelt did with the Works Progress Administration: give America a high-tech upgrade. Hire the unemployed, rebuild America. Number one. Number two, put our oil and gas and our natural resources under public ownership. So the profits from the soil of America, the profits from our natural resources go into the public budget. Number three would be to create a national bank so that we can assign credit strategically in the overall interest of the country, right? A national bank that could inject credit into communities so that we're planning out how we can rebuild the country. And fourth would then be to enact an economic Bill of Rights: the right to a job, the right to housing, the right to education, but in a little bit of a different sense than like Mamdani and others talk about it. The way a lot of people talk about this stuff is like, corporations get free stuff all the time, tax breaks and all of that. We should get free stuff too. I agree with that, right? I mean, it's true, but there's kind of a pessimistic way of looking at it. Like, oh, screw this, I want some free stuff. Well, it's not like that. We should view it as an investment, right? If we want to have a strong country, we need educated people who can go out and do great things. So we should invest in the next generation by providing education. If we want a prosperous country, we should have people that are healthy, that can go out and work and do great things. If we want to have a prosperous country, we should hire everyone. There should be a jobs guarantee so that every person's productive labor goes into the economy. And that we need a government that invests in people, not in derivative ripoff schemes, and not in wars, and not in prisons for profit, but in people, because human beings and their labor power and their creativity is the source of all wealth, right? And that's ultimately what is needed. And if we had a 4-point plan like that, right, that we could rebuild America and have a government that invests in human beings, and we could then connect with the countries around the world that have broken out of imperialism and start trading with countries on the basis of win-win cooperation, maybe hire the Chinese Railway Corporation to build some high-speed railway to connect the United States, the Midwest and the heartland to California, maybe build a bridge over the Bering Sea and connect Alaska with Russia and get us closer to the Eurasian Economic Union and the episode of economic growth that's happening, right? Wall Street Journal just said that the greatest economic success of the year is North Korea, right? They're having a boom over there. Wouldn't it be great if America could get in on some of that economic growth, connect us with the rising new economy, trade with countries on the basis of win-win cooperation, invest in our people? I think most Americans would agree to that. I think that program that I just put out would be agreeable to most people. I think if you took an up and down vote on whether we should enact those 4 points, I think it would be overwhelmingly in favor. But we have a political system that's kind of designed to keep that from happening. I also want to say this. In Italy, in the 1970s, they experienced something called the Years of Lead. It was a disastrous time in Italy's history. What was going on? Italy was getting ready to leave NATO. The public on the left and the right wanted to leave NATO. And they just didn't want to be part of the NATO alliance. They felt like America hadn't been very good to Italy economically. The Communist Party was rising in popularity, and the Christian Democratic Party and right-wing groups were rising. They all wanted to leave NATO. The CIA fomented Operation Gladio, which was a huge manipulation of Italian politics to make sure they didn't leave NATO. And it involved fomenting political violence, right? And hundreds of people were killed. People were shot in their legs. There were bombings. There were assassinations. And the population became demoralized. The population became weary. It got confusing. People didn't know who was on what side. And as a result, Italy is now still a member of NATO. And I would maintain that's what our leaders are doing right now. They're waging a counterinsurgency, manipulating the left against the right, manipulating the left against the left and the right against the right, creating all kinds of political violence, you talked about trauma, right? Using trauma and people's fear and creating a situation where we won't get the kind of unifying, optimistic movement that we need to get us out of this nightmare. Look, the murder of Charlie Kirk, it's not the murder itself, but it's the what came afterwards, the manipulation. The memo went out on the left that it was your job to celebrate this and say it was good. And the memo went out on the right that all the leftists are cheering for this because they want to kill you and they want to kill your family. And the whole country was traumatized by that event. And it was a disaster. And I saw that and I said, this is the years of lead, right? This is what they're doing. This is counterinsurgency, right? Manipulate the dissidents. For 4,000 or 5,000 years, the story of David and Goliath has been told. And as William S. Lind, the Pentagon counterinsurgency strategist, said, people always sympathize with David. Nobody sympathizes with Goliath. So if you want to defeat an insurgency, you don't have Goliath fight David because everyone's going to support David. What you do is you have Goliath stand back and you create 5 or 6 different Davids who start fighting each other and nobody knows who the real David is. And Goliath just sits back and says, oh boy, why are you guys fighting? What's the problem here? And Goliath wins by default, right? And that's what they're trying to do right now. And so I really admire what you're doing on this podcast. You all are helping people see through this and helping people put forward an optimistic vision. That is largely, and I feel like it is our duty to advocate optimism. It is our duty to celebrate humanity. It is our duty to try and bring out the best in people. And if we can build a political movement that aims to do that, that's what we want to do. My political organization, the Center for Political Innovation, we used to call ourselves communists. We don't do that anymore because if you talk about communism in America, people immediately think it's a conversation about making everyone equal. Right? That's what people think. And that's not really what happened in the 20th century. It was countries that had been kept in poverty by imperialism, by globalism, breaking out of that and having economic growth, building themselves up. And that's what we need in America. We need a pro-growth government. That's what we need, a government that wants to unleash human creativity and brilliance and build. And that people don't think of that when they think of communism in America. They think of income redistribution or taxes or
that's why you can't put labels on anything. That's
we are innovationists. That's what we call ourselves. We celebrate what makes the human species unique, its ability to reinvent its relationship with nature and rise to a higher plane. We're innovationists. We're the Center for Political Innovation. And we have people all across the country. We blocked the No Kings Parade back in March, right? They had the No Kings Parade that didn't include Iran, didn't include no war against Iran. So we linked arms along 7th Avenue and we made them bring their marshals in and clear us out. And we had a standoff in Manhattan against the No Kings Parade. And that was one thing that we did. We've been having rallies promoting Ibrahim Traore, the great leader of Burkina Faso, and showing him as an example of what a government could do to invest in its people. We carry out all kinds of different projects. We are an educational organization, and we're laying the foundations for what will eventually come. Look, the explosion is going to happen. The volcano is going to erupt. It's going to happen. The question is, will it go in the right direction? I tell people, you got to imagine there's a boulder that's going to roll down the mountain. We're not going to make the boulder roll down the mountain, but we have the ability to nudge that boulder in what direction it goes. And that's what we have the ability to do. And that's what we need to be in the position to do, to nudge the boulder so that when it starts rolling down the mountain with all that momentum, it goes in the right direction.
Caleb, you were fantastic. Guys, links in the description, the latest book of many. You definitely have a highly functioning brain.
Imperialism and anti-imperialism. Look at that.
That's me.
So it's pretty
simple.
That.
Thank you for coming on. And people really have no concept about these names and what a communist is. And anytime I talk about the importance of the collective on here, that's what I'll get called. I'll get called, you're a communist. It's, and yet every country that understands the collective is being more successful than the countries that it's so common sense. It's just crazy.
Yeah,
but I do think it's smarter marketing not to call yourself a communist.
Yes. Well, unfortunately, what we've learned, and I'm sure you've learned, is that you can speak to the average person who actually is somewhat open-minded, regardless of where they stand on the political spectrum. Most people, unless they're truly elite, most people have a working class disposition about most issues. But the second you label them is when you can lose them. So if you just stick to the issues and focus on what your 4-point plan, which for the most part seems pretty solid to me, the second economic Bill of Rights that Roosevelt came up with in 44 seemed to be something that could have taken off exponentially back in the day had the Democratic Party. We know the Democratic Party in the history of sabotage. Didn't sabotage Henry Wallace at the 1944 Democratic National Convention.
Yep.
That was one of those moments that could have changed history as well. So, lot to learn. Lot was learned, and we hope we get to speak with you again in the near future.
Anytime. Just be in
Thank
touch.
you, Caleb. So nice to meet you.
Thank you. Yep.
Thank you, brother. So like we said, tonight you get a double dose. And if you like these double doses, which some people do, please consider going over to patreon.com/revolutionary change for as little as $5 a month. You can become a supporter of our small but mighty, despite heavily suppressed yet still growing channel.
And it helps immensely, guys, because it's a lot. Google is not our friend. Google is just not our friend.
And who owns Google? Who owns YouTube? Alphabet. Just the fact that a Zionist Jewish oligarch would call his organization Alphabet, as in the alphabet agencies. I mean, for the love of God, they're shoving it in our face. They don't care.
No, they don't.
Willie Bragg, always a pleasure, guys. Subscribe to the Willie Bragg
Hey,
Show on
Willie.
YouTube for the $5. Bill Clinton, George W. Okay, Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, Barack Obama, and Joe Biden are as much war criminals as the Donald. Nice manners ain't equal being a nice person. I definitely agree.
Completely.
The average Canadian with the not so average 20 Canadian A, thank you very much. I find it ironic that you fought a civil war to abolish slavery, to only turn around and be slaves to Israel.
Yeah.
Pretty sad.
Yeah.
But I agree. Jim Taleb with the $5. Always a pleasure, my friend. Libertarian Social Dem has been a member for 8 months. I heard there is an Austin Powers 4. I think they need a fat bastard double for Mike Myers. I think Randy Fine will be the perfect choice. Hey, maybe even Ben Gavir. I tell you, those two look like they were separated at birth, my opinion. Kimiko, great to see you. Thank you for becoming a YouTube member.
She was. I don't know what happened. Kimiko has been a member. I think I saw something in the chat like then she was not a member, but she was a member. So welcome.
We're back now in that counts.
Yeah.
Ronwell, it's a pleasure to see you, my friend. Thank you for the $2. Just wanted to say hi to Caleb. It's been a while.
Thanks for checking in.
Yes, and Ronwell is a big Massey supporter. So as you can see, guys, a lot of it really just comes down to issues, working class issues.
It's all working class issues.
Now
that's the whole point.
Libertarian Social Dem with a 199. Colombia just fell to the Zios with the results. They have put a hell of a lot of money into South America, so that should not come as a surprise to anybody. So it's unfortunate, but not at all surprising. Libertarian Social Dem with the 199. Far-right Zios stronghold is now Latin America. Yes, and this is history repeats itself. Donovan, thank you for becoming a YouTube member. We really appreciate it. And of course,
that's not my Donovan, right? Like my Donovan Frankenreiter Donovan. No, he spells it different. He spells it different. No, it's okay.
Fair enough. Hello with the $20. Excellent discussion. Thank you very much. I don't recognize.
Hello.
Yes. Hello. Well, hello.
Hello.
Gregory Yagogo with the $5. Very inspirational show today. Thanks, guys. Thank you for your support. And of course, as you know, you can become a YouTube member. You can leave a super chat. We obviously also encourage you to go to Patreon. That helps out a great deal as well.
Yeah.
And then, of course, if you aren't currently subscribed on Rumble, if you're not currently subscribed on Instagram, if you're not currently subscribed on TikTok, we are Revolutionary Change on all of those channels. So.
And Substack, you have a Substack now.
Yes, I do have Substack. Let me throw that up there as well. Thank you. Okay. I haven't had a chance. I've been sick, guys, as you know. I haven't had as much time to just kind of stay focused on this. But substack.com/@Revolutionary Change. We appreciate your support there as well.
We have a lot. Like, we haven't even really gotten into anything because it's been like back-to-back guests. And so we're going to have to, like, not all of this is going to be able to get covered today. So
Ladies
you
and-
need to prioritize.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Zionists, as we've mentioned, are feeling the heat. They're feeling the heat so badly that they have to do a little R&R. So the IDF soldiers, they need to find their relaxation. They need to get centered with their genocidal behavior. So why not do a little yoga?
As we are here on International Yoga Day and the summer solstice, no place better to be than on top of Tel Aviv with these beautiful.
How dare this bitch reference the solstice? She doesn't know shit about that.
Highly unlikely.
Good Lord.
Full views celebrating the fact that we are experiencing a very profound moment here in Israel. Behind me, you see dozens of people that are taking part in a yoga practice as part of a nonprofit called Brothers in Yoga. It's an organization started by a wonderful woman named Netta Margalit, who has dedicated all of her time and energy and resources to bringing somatic healing yoga practices to starting with soldiers who've experienced PTSD, not just PTSD in light of October 7th and the subsequent war, but also soldiers that have been traumatized and suffering from all kinds of issues in combats and other types of fighting situations.
My God.
Oh my
Other
God.
fighting situations, you know, when you gotta assassinate an infant, it takes a toll on you, doesn't it? This is how do you even address this?
I can't, because as someone who has practiced yoga for years, everything about Ziohel is the antithesis of yoga. This is silly.
This is the
That
same
they're even
thing.
doing that. I mean, yeah.
Well, this is the same thing as Pilates. And I do yoga and Pilates. and
No, yoga is not the same as Pilates.
No, I'm saying in terms of it's about centering you want to say your chakra, your inner.
That's not Pilates. Stick with yoga. You don't know Pilates.
Whatever. I do know, but maybe not as much as you. Jen is better at Pilates than I am.
Better at Pilates. You don't do Pilates.
Yes, I do. Stop saying that I don't.
Okay,
do.
you've done a couple of mat classes. That's not the same thing as what I'm talking
Okay, so I haven't done the bar and stuff like that. That doesn't mean that I wouldn't do it.
It's a reformer, Peter. It's a reformer.
Fair enough. So there is something to be said for the type of people that typically make videos and clips about participating in yoga and even Pilates, yes. And unfortunately, it gives off a very elitist, disconnected representation of what is a very important practice. It is very good for the soul. Now, unfortunately, these particular genocidal numbskulls really think that they deserve sympathy. Like the IOF soldiers who are mass murdering women and children. They need to get centered. They need to feel better about themselves. That's what's being celebrated here. This is a level of disconnect that is beyond reprehensible as far as I'm concerned. But don't worry, there's more.
Even before the October 7th massacre, now we're really recognizing and aware of the fact that PTSD is something real that many are going through, not just from combat, not just from October 7th and the war, but also the impact of the world reaction to the war and the situation here in Israel. So this group right here is dedicated to taking in these practices. And what's more special about this organization is that many of these soldiers, once they have learned themselves, are getting teacher training where they are then able to take it into the field to IDF units that are currently serving not only in reserves, but also in real time, with an end goal of being able to take these practices before having to have the effects of post-trauma and having to do it in retrospect. Another thing that we need to take into account of what happened on October 7th is that it basically reopened a lot of the unhealed wounds that haven't been dealt with from soldiers that have been in other types of situations, like I mentioned, like the Second Intifada, the Lebanon War and whatnot. You have people from all different ages.
After October 7th, like most of the people, everything that was buried kind of rose up.
Brothers in
and
yoga?
I was really
Brothers in yoga?
Combat soldier. That's what he's calling himself.
That's like fucking for virginity, right? Like there's no point to this. I don't understand this.
I'm kind of at a loss for words with this one. Like, this is when people, you have been saying for the longest time, you've been saying it repeatedly over the past, you were saying this prior to October 7th, you were saying this 4 or 5 years ago, that you were saying this, like I said, before October 7th, this is a fascist, genocidal, ideological country.
Yes. How can they do yoga?
Insane.
It's the complete antithesis of yoga. And by the way, and I would love to tell this woman that, lady, you can do all the yoga in the world. Nothing like that will help these people. You honestly, at best, they're getting a little stretching. The whole point of yoga is not just stretching, or it would just be stretching. If it was just stretching, it would be called stretching. These people can't do yoga. You need peace of mind. You need some sort of like inner voice that kind of, these people don't have that.
Nope.
Ridiculous.
Not even a little bit.
suffering and struggling. I was looking for some tools I can use to regulate myself, and then I came up to know trauma sensitive yoga. I was already a yoga teacher before that, and then I went to a course to take a course to try to help myself and try to help others. And I remember the time that Netta came in, and it was love at first sight. Like, you could totally see her vision. I totally connected to the way she sees the practice and the possibilities of really helping out, really healing people through yoga. And I began to experience that myself, and in time pass it on to others. Now I do that in the organization and also in the army.
So again, what a better way to have an overarching view of the city of Tel Aviv on a day that is so important around the world, in light of the fact that we here in Israel are still going through quite a lot. Being up here makes you forget for a moment, being able to breathe the air. And once again, we can see this group here really getting into the zone, getting into movement, breathing, all of these things that, for those of you that haven't done yoga before, really are so essential. It's not about sweating and necessarily doing a cardiovascular workout. It is about taking that moment to go within, to breathe, and it really, really helps regulate the nervous system.
You people don't have a nervous system. That would imply humanity. Yeah, that's sick. So the next time I ever watch that, I want to see a bomb landing on it. I want to see her, look at beautiful Tel Aviv. And I want to see friggin' ballistic missiles going off and them all running for their lives. Yo. You're muted. You're muted.
We needed a radiometer. You didn't see that?
No, I didn't see it. Oh, I see it on, okay. I didn't see it. Sometimes my thing doesn't play.
That's weird.
I know. I know. I see it on my phone where I have it, but it's not on the computer. Yeah.
We're going to juxtapose that piece with something that I was waiting for you to come on here that we could talk about. When you talk about humanity, you talk about centering yourself, you're talking about things that really matter. This matters. Mona Khalil They knew exactly who Mona Khalil was.
Was this the woman who was like fighting for the sea turtles?
Correct.
The environmentalist? Okay, yeah.
They knew the bright orange house in Mansouri, South Lebanon. They knew it was not a military site, not a command center, not a battlefield position. It was one of the most recognizable symbols of environmental conservation on Lebanon's southern coast, a sanctuary dedicated to protecting endangered sea turtles and preserving life. Marwa Osman writes about Israel's deliberate targeting of a prominent environmental activist in Lebanon. These are crimes against humanity. And they need trauma yoga sessions. They need
Well, here though, on a positive note, their yoga instructors are psychotic too. So it's kind of like they're not actually even having probably real yoga anyway. So who knows what that is? It's like I don't know. It's like Zio yoga.
Colin, pull it up, please.
Yeah, this was the woman who had been fighting for years for the sea turtles. They believe that was her organization. What I just saw a picture of her. I saw a picture of her with the turtle.
Mona spent her years defending the most vulnerable creatures of the Mediterranean, teaching generations that every life matters, that nature is not a casualty to be discarded, and that humanity has a duty to protect what cannot protect itself. Yet the same orange house that stood as a beacon of conservation became a target for terrorist Israel. This was an assault on a woman whose life's work was devoted to safeguarding life itself, a woman known internationally for her environmental activism, whose name had become synonymous with the protection of Lebanon's coastline and its endangered sea turtles. The murder of Mona Khalil sends a chilling message. Even those whose only weapon is compassion, whose only mission is preservation, are not spared.
Yeah, I saw that. That's what I saw. Yeah, that's what we need to do. We need to kill people that protect turtles, because that's dangerous. We can't have that.
Everything they do, everything that they do,
it's infuriating.
Is to destroy.
It's just so infuriating.
They have no identifying marks. They're just a create. They're as fake as a $3 bill, but they're also lacking in humanity in the worst way. They don't try to find it. They just go out and try to steal it from everybody else's. In a way, it reminds me of The Thing with, John Carpenter's The Thing from 1982.
Yeah, I know of it, but I don't watch that stuff. This.
I understand. But the point is, the host had no identifying marks. They had to take on, they had to join the host and basically become them. But they're not real. It's just a knockoff. It's an imitation. It's hell recreated. And that's exactly what they're doing. The environment has always been one of the primary drivers of my level of interest in politics. It's why I got involved. I get really tired of when people scream at the top of their lungs about the environment, but they don't know the first thing about how you deal with environmental protection. If you can't breathe the air, if you can't drink the water, then whatever those energy extractions are, for example, is going to be the death of us if we don't do something about it. And whether that is alternative energies, nuclear energy, high-speed rail, lots of things that we could be doing. And that includes protecting our oceans, which is something we don't do. And
I'm sad about these sea turtles. I'm so sad about the sea. Just leave the sea turtles the fuck alone. I can't just leave the critters alone. It's so aggravating. Oh my God.
And this is what they do. This is why it's so bad. And so it brings us to the main story of the evening, which is a community in Italy that you probably are not familiar with, but we are now. Colin, can I have the story, please?
Guys that are suggesting I watch the movie, not happening. I don't watch scary. I don't watch gross. I don't watch old scary and gross. I don't watch it even when people say, oh, but then it's not really that scary. It's in black and white, whatever it is. No. I don't like scary. I don't want to, just no. No, not my thing. I don't do it. I have enough real things that I have nightmares about on a regular basis that I don't need to throw in some other shit that I could have nightmares about. I'm good. Thank you all. But yeah, if you know, I'm good with sad. I could do sad. I'm good with sad. I could do a good cry, but never scary. Okay.
Yeah. I can do all.
Yeah. To me, I cannot understand for the life of me at all how anybody wants to be scared. That is the worst feeling in the world to me. I don't ever want to feel scared. I don't ever want to feel anxious. Like that happens naturally and it sucks enough. Why would I subject myself to do that on purpose? I do not understand. I've never understood this.
Speaking of scary, as we showed you, this is why you don't invite Israelis into your home. You don't even allow
That's
them
not
to
why
visit.
I don't invite him
No,
into my home.
I mean, there's many reasons, but this is one of the main ones.
Okay.
From the Italian Times, Valsesia, the Italian Alpine Valley, turning into an Israeli colony.
Wait. And where do we know? Where is this? What valley did you just say? What is it? Which valley?
Alpine Valley.
Okay, so then this is northern Italy. So this is really upsetting because, you know, one of my bucket list trips is through the Dolomites. And so now these fucks are there. So unfortunate.
From Borgo Esesia to Varallo, passing through Crava
Crava.
Giuliana and Scopello. The valleys of Piedmont are experiencing a rather unusual demographic revival. At the center of this transformation is Progetto Beata, an initiative that has already brought more than 80 Israeli families to Valsesia, around 250 people with over 400 registered members. Determined to start a new life and invest in a territory that until recently has been marked by depopulation. On paper, this appears to be a story of pure administrative pragmatism and hospitality, often framed under the label of the so-called Varallo model. Yet, when observing the dynamics through the lens of the current international power relations, profound moral and political distortions emerge. This case reflects broader global tensions around migration, inequality, and geopolitical accountability. Jen, if you would, please.
I'm looking on the map to see if I can see where this is. Yeah, okay. So this is actually not. All right, well, this doesn't interfere with my bucket list, is what I'm going to say. This is actually closer to, yeah, this is east of that. Okay. Not that I don't feel bad for those people, but the dominant narrative in the media focuses on the rescue of small towns and the flight of people tired of the tensions of war. Ugo Luzzati, the creator of the project, described the initiative's origins as follows. I used to come to Valsesia. That doesn't sound Italian, Valsesia, with my family on vacation. But at a certain point, I began spending more and more time there until I moved. My country changed, something broke. The 2023 judicial reform split Israel. It was the escalation of events in the Middle East that turned this migration into a structured exodus. Since October 7th, our association has played a fundamental role, emphasizing the need to move away from the escalation of war. On the other side, local administrations in the Vercelli area have embraced the arrival of these people and their capital. There it is right there. With evident enthusiasm, overshadowing the geopolitical weight of this demographic transplant. The mayor of Valsesia, Pietro Bondetti, proudly celebrates the impact. Classes this full hadn't been seen since the 1960s. Before their arrival, this area was at risk of demographic desertification. Today, we have been reborn.
How much do you think you got paid to say that shit?
Oh, that. And you have not been reborn. You have been infested.
Invested. A collective narrative that unites
Infested, not
in
invested.
celebrating families arriving in search of a peaceful and serene life. Far from the dangers of wars, reported on the website The Jewish Community of Milan, the same community that, though its vice president, Dalia Gubi, expressed deep concern about a growing climate of hostility and anti-Semitism in Italy and Europe. Each time it gets worse. I consider myself a strong woman, but when I talk about it, I feel emotional. There are moments when we truly feel like it's the 1930s again. Some things are very, very similar, too similar. The same community that condemns the violence perpetrated against flotilla activists while also describing the activists' actions as provocative. Defending Israel also means demanding that its institutions always act in respect of human dignity, law, and democratic values, said Walker Megnage, president of the Jewish Community of Milan, regarding the events in which Israel attacked the flotilla. Yet it is the same community that labels as anti-Semitic anyone who criticizes Israel, its policies, and its Zionist ideology, such as ANPI, Italy's National Association of Partisans, which through its president, Gianfranco Pagliarulo, has threatened legal action. Your turn.
Luzzati explains the painful choice that accompanied them, speaking of how democracy in Israel has come to an end. Never existed, but describing an irreversible process that will lead to the country's downfall. However, he says they do not want labels and are not dissidents. So in other words, they're just pussies. Okay. Many of the new residents are freeloaders. As clarified by Luzzati, almost all the newcomers are graduates holding prominent positions: doctors, pharmacists, engineers, and IT professionals. Some are trying to integrate into their local labor market. But as Luzzati also explains, many continue to work in Israel and with its war economy from home in the Piedmont Mountains. So in other words, they're still working for Israel. They're still supporting the Israel economy. They're not supporting the Italian economy. They're just living there and working remotely because they're pussies. That's the gist of what I'm.
Well, they're chosen, Jen. Don't forget.
Okay. Well, I'm just making sure. So they're okay. They don't have a problem with what's going on in Ziohel. They just don't want anything to happen to them.
Correct.
Got it. Typical. I lost where I was. Summertime, is that what it is? Oh, okay. You got it.
But as Luzzati also explains, many continue, okay, so as you pointed that out, we are thinking of an academic hub focused on cybersecurity and artificial intelligence. They really do make it so easy for you to not care whether they all burn in hell. Really, no. How could you not? We care about cybersecurity and AI. That's what you're focused on? Fields in which
the only reason they're getting away with this, and this is what I'm gathering from this article, is that this town was very underpopulated. Yeah. These areas were so underpopulated that they really needed the economic input. Yeah. And so that makes them ripe for the infestation. That's how they do. I mean, that's the easiest way for them to do it. And I kind of understand that to some extent, because there are a lot of towns that are dying and died. And so you don't want that either. But this is what they're going to prey on. And all I can do is hope that the locals, that anybody local, that Italian people do not tolerate this.
And you're also seeing the remnants of what a failed capitalist system does, because remember, it isn't just about the United States. It's economics the world over. We are still technically the world's economic superpower. And as a result, so many nations adhere to our economic philosophy. And as a result, because there are no guardrails anymore and really haven't been, and now Trump is accelerating it to such an extent that the concentration of wealth has become so grandiose that these communities that are dying and desperate, and the Zio entity has so much of the financial capability, they can come into these communities. We'll solve your problem. We'll give you money. You give us land, and the rest is history. And this is going to repeat itself in a lot of places unless the world rises up. That's really what's needed. You see what the Albanians are doing? Everybody needs to take a cue from what they're doing. Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank know something about that. The technological security and defense sector, with its expertise and capital, together with the country's most prestigious universities, forms a unified system with the state in constituting what it is described as Israel's machinery of apartheid and ethnic cleansing.
Colin, thank you. Okay, the moral crux of this story also lies in the structural privilege of mobility. Again, the wealthy people get to do this. This new promised land in the heart of Al-Sija is accessible only to those with strong passports and financial resources. While Western governments facilitate these citizens' right to move freely, purchase alpine cottages, and obtain high-speed fiber optics for remote work, the civilian population of Gaza faces extermination and a total siege, deprived of water, hospitals, and any means of escape. An inequitable idea becomes normalized, that escaping war is a luxury right. Exactly. That's what exactly.
1,000%.
It's so gross.
It's like the letters of transit. The asymmetry is stark, especially in the reality experienced by Varallo. Same Piedmont community waited in vain for the arrival of a single Palestinian family fleeing conflict. The attempt failed because the family remained trapped in Gaza, crushed by continuous bombings and an insurmountable system of denied visas. The redevelopment of a part of Italy is thus built on a particularly harsh privilege, a contrast that condemns Palestinian civilians to a repeated role as victims, confined within the Strip with no way out, while those who leave behind the state responsible for their massacre, even while continuing to work for it remotely, find in the Alps hospitality, safety, and space for a new beginning. Money talks and justice walks, and that's essentially what you have here. And this is going to be the last sort of will and testament of the Zionist cause, because what they have is resources. That's what they have. Their ideology is for nothing. I don't think most, if any, people even embrace it at this point. However, when you have control of the gold, for now, there are people that will open their doors. But what's going to happen, which has been happening, as has been displayed in this story and in many other stories, when they open the doors for them, they regret it very quickly. They're like, oh, I don't know why the hell we did this. Whatever we had before, we're much better off. Israelis are not endearing people. They are the most despised people. And that, in many ways, is the conclusion of the story tonight. But this will just take a couple of minutes, Jen. I just want to touch on this really quick. When we think about the issues that exist amongst the elite class, this covers all cultures. This isn't just Israel. This is Iran as well. And as we have pointed out, the Iranian diaspora, particularly in Southern California, is very much like the Cuban exiles in South Florida and a lot of these other cultures. You've put it very eloquently, Jen. Let's play it, and then you'll explain why this is this way.
Team is not Iranian team. This is IRGC team. Terrorists. They are supporting terrorists.
Dumb. If I don't agree with the regime, that doesn't mean I don't support the team. The team is different. These are the people that represent Iran. I don't care about the politics. It's for Iran, for the Persian people. I'm supporting Iran. I'm not supporting the regime.
The team represents all Iranian people.
We're at the Iran-Belgium match here in Los Angeles, home to the largest Iranian community outside of Iran. And the mood here is very divided. For many people, it's not just a football match. It's more become a battleground over the Iran they believe in. Outside the stadium, protesters were boycotting the match. They argue that supporting Iran's national team is, in effect, supporting the Iranian government. Some Iranian players served with the Islamic Revolutionary Guard for their mandatory military service.
There is no way that we can separate politics from soccer, from sport. When they score goal, we do not feel anything. We are not happy.
Are you attending the game?
Yes.
Can you explain this privilege that exists within this community as well?
Are you talking about the wealthy community of the people that have left their origin country?
Sure.
So we've talked about this before, and it applies to Iranians, it applies to Cubans, it applies to Venezuelans, it applies to basically everyone, because at the end of the day, it's a class war. It's a class war. It's a class war. It's a class war globally. So when you see people that have left countries where they at one point were, king shit a fuck mountain, and then some sort of socialist movement came to happen in that country, and they were no longer that. And so they left and came here where they could still just be wealthy. And so from here, what they want to do is they want to push back their home country to how it was for them. It was good for them. It was good for them when the right was in charge. They don't want a socialist situation. So that's what it is. It's the wealthy people.
So you won't be cheering?
No, I will not be.
Iranian fans have shown up with the lion and sun flag, which FIFA has banned as a political symbol. The lion and sun flag was Iran's national symbol before the 1979 revolution and is especially popular among the Iranian diaspora community here in LA, many of whom fled after the revolution. And you'll be trying to bring this in?
Of course.
And what will you do if they try to take it away?
I will try to bring them in. If I can't, guess what? I have one here.
Some fans got their lion and sun flag confiscated as FIFA has prohibited them. As you can see, people have managed to smuggle the lion and sun flag inside the stadium. But many Iranians also say cheering for the team doesn't mean supporting the government.
People come first, not the government.
What do you think the national team of Iran represents for you?
Oh, they represent the entire Iranian community, whether inside the Iran or outside. We're all united. We're all cheering for the same team.
I do not agree with the government in some aspects, but we are all from Iran, and we want the best for our countries.
See, that's normal. That's a normal person response, even if, you are not in agreement, whatever.
Which is why so much of this is based on class.
Yeah. But there are people that are now the next generation. So, like that young woman who, she does. I mean, maybe her parents had that, and maybe she was in some way raised from the descendants of that. But she seems to just be pretty typical. Right. Like, I mean, I don't think that that's most people of the next generation that weren't so overly indoctrinated by their parents.
I also think it's fair to say that, and we have to preface this with, obviously the Iranians are not conducting themselves anywhere near the way that Israelis conduct themselves. However, it is a reflection in many respects that this truly is a class war. And that's what it's always been. And that's what it always will be. So once we figure that out, once we figure out that most of this fight is based along class lines, and as I said, you will need class traders in your midst as well, that's how the fundamental revolutionary change, if you will be abound. We do have a few more super chats to get to before we go for this evening. Let's give a shout out to Noria with the $10. Thank you for bringing Dr. West. Wonderful show as usual. Thank you very much for your support. Donna Vorsi with the $20. Thanks for all you're doing. Donna, it's always great to see you in the chat. You're one of our favorites. The franchisee with the $10. Peter's favorite palindrome is Yoga Goy.
That's actually good.
Fair enough. Give you
Yoga Goy. Oh, it's really good.
Yoga Goy. Yoga Goy. Yoga Goy.
Well, palindromes are not easy to come by,
No, definitely not. Piano Man with the $10 super sticker. Great to see you, pal. Really appreciate it. H299 with the $4.99. Thank you very much for the super sticker. And finally, user Zalexis with the $4.99. How long until Ziohel reallocates Colombia mercenaries to Israel?
No, to Lebanon.
To Lebanon from Jordan?
Sudan? What is going on here?
Yeah, trying to figure that one out.
The same way they reallocated THAADs from DMZ to defend Israel. What is?
So that's Israel reallocates Colombia mercenaries to,
I am so confused.
To Israel from.
No, to Lebanon.
Where do you see the Lebanese flag?
I see LB. I don't see any flags. I only see LB. So I see IL, LB, ST.
Oh, maybe you're right. Again, if anybody in the chat, I see the
guys. Here's the problem. I'm seeing through StreamYard, so I don't see the emojis. I see like these little initials, and that's why it's hard to read these.
Yeah, but I'm on StreamYard as well.
Do you see emojis?
Yes, I do.
Okay, see, I don't see emojis.
Interesting. Okay, you need to upgrade your computer.
Please. I'm not living with tech support anymore. So
Israel reallocates Colombian mercenaries to Lebanon from Palestine. Okay.
Yeah, it looks like the Lebanon flag is what somebody's saying. I just saw LB.
The same way they reallocated THAADs from the DMZ to defend Israel. What's your price to die? Well, I don't know if people necessarily have a price to die. We're living through hell.
Lebanon and Sudan. Right. See, I was right.
I thought it was Sudan or Jordan. I wasn't sure.
And so it's kind of funny because I would think it would be easier for me to look at the initials and make sense of it before you would recognize like the flag of Sudan.
True.
Right. That's why. So maybe it's kind of good that I don't see the flag. I just see the initials. I have a better chance of getting it.
Well, they're trying to escape so that they can kind of weather the storm. At least some of them are. You're not going to get them all, but Zionism is dying. Maybe not a fast death, but it's dying nonetheless. And that's why we cover these stories. There's other things we could cover, obviously, but in the end, this is all interconnected to the highest levels of our government that does not give a damn about any of us. It's a tale as old as time, crumbling empire. This is typically how it goes. Overexpansion of the military, devaluing of the currency, and the restlessness of the people who at some point will have no choice but to rise up. So
right. Well, again, we are now at the precipice of stage 6 of the 7 stages of fall of empire. So stage 6 is de-dollarization, is when you cease to have the global currency, when you cease to control global currency. So we're like on the precipice of that. And that's pretty much it.
Touche. Smash that like button, share, subscribe, do all those things we ask you to do. We love you all. We appreciate you all. We will see you Thursday.
Free Palestine.
Good night, guys.